A dark-haired girl arrives home, proudly carrying a basket of fruit she bought with her hard-earned scholarship money. But instead of praise, her mom scolds her, complaining that her brothers only eat premium stuff from the department store. Just then, her brothers walk in and the mom immediately switches up, completely ignoring her. The family heads out to visit their grandma, loudly bragging about another girl's success just to rub it in. To make matters worse, the mom brutally tells her to stay behind and take her cheap fruit with her. Left all alone in the dark, she quietly heads to her room. She feels completely isolated, living like a total stranger in her own home. Exhausted from the emotional toll, she flops onto her bed like a rag doll. Seeking an escape from reality, she grabs her phone. A notification pops up for her favorite web novel, I Need to Be Adopted. It's a daily updated story that she religiously follows every single night. The novel features a deeply loved protagonist and a super doting father. Reading about how much everyone adores the heroine, she sheds a tear at the wholesome family dynamic. On a miserable day like today, this story is her only lifeline. She clutches her phone, wondering why she can't have a family like that. She desperately wishes for a world where people actually love her. Somewhere in the void, the gears of fate literally start turning. And she falls asleep with that one final wish in her heart. Suddenly, she wakes up as an adorable pink-haired toddler. Taking in the massive medieval bedroom, her seasoned reader senses start tingling. She quickly realizes she's been completely ice-guyed into another world. Spotting dragon statues and paintings everywhere, she connects the dots. She has officially spawned into the universe of her favorite novel. She recalls the deep lore about the powerful Edam family, descendants of the Black Dragon. The family's ancestors made a sacred blood contract with the beast. By drinking its blood, they gained immense, unmatched power. But as a side effect, their mana frequently goes absolutely wild, triggering intense murderous urges. This chronic curse is known throughout the land as the Brightening Disease. The only person capable of purifying this chaotic energy is the novel's female lead. She is destined to be the true savior of the Edam family. Since she knows the story inside and out, our girl assumes she must have possessed the legendary heroine. She gets super hyped, ready to live a pampered, stress-free life. Eagerly, she rushes over to the window to check out her reflection. But wait, she has bright pink hair. The original female lead definitely had jet black hair. She stares at her reflection in absolute disbelief. The truth hits her like a freight train. She's not the main character, she's the doomed illegitimate daughter. According to the plot, right when this character turned 5, a massive incident called her bloodline into question. And she ended up getting ruthlessly kicked out to fend for herself. She totally loses it, throwing a mental tantrum over her incredibly tragic luck. Then a chilling realization suddenly strikes her. She sits by the courtyard fountain, absolutely stunned, while a maid rushes over in a panic. Her maid, Mela, gently tries to comfort her with a warm drink and some biscuits. Taking a tiny sip, her eyes go wide at how crazy delicious it is. Mela proudly explains it's hot chocolate, a rare treat she managed to snag from the kitchen. The maid smiles warmly, just happy to see the little miss enjoying herself. Mela is the only person in this entire world who actually treats her with genuine care. Feeling a bit better, she casually asks Mela if there's a festival happening tomorrow. But when Mela cheerfully announces that tomorrow is the infamous New Year's party, she violently spits out her drink. Mela freaks out, while our girl realizes her tragic eviction is literally less than 24 hours away. She spits out her drink in shock and face splints on the ground, completely devastated that tomorrow is the day she gets booted from the family. But she quickly pushes herself up, realizing she doesn't have time to just sit around and cry about it. She tells Mela she'll be back soon and asks her to bring the rest of the hot chocolate to her room, leaving the poor maid super confused. Bolting down the hallway, she decides her first priority is finding a new place to live. She heads straight for the massive family library to look up a list of nursery schools using her meta-knowledge of the novel. But her 5-year-old legs are super short, leaving her completely winded by the time she reaches the giant doors. Pushing them open, she tries to recall the specific orphanage run by a retired Holy War hero. She creeps inside into the dark room, but her memory of the exact details is totally fuzzy. Suddenly, she spots a tall, imposing figure quietly reading a book by the shelves. He has stunningly dark hair and striking golden eyes that practically glow. She stares in absolute awe, thinking the heavens must have sculpted this guy with absolute perfection. She recognizes him immediately as the infamous Erno Edam. Seeing him in the flesh is wild, as he looks exactly like a top-tier character straight out of the original story. But she internally panics, wondering what on earth he's doing here since she hasn't seen him in over a year. Erno turns to her with a sharp look and asks if she knows where a specific book on divine magic is kept. Snapping out of her daze, she internally slaps herself for getting captivated by his looks. With a massive, innocent smile, she mispronounces some words in her cute baby voice, guiding him to the second shelf. But Erno just glares at her in silence. She instantly regrets the baby talk, remembering he absolutely hates it, and decides to just pretend they don't know each other. She quickly pivots, turning her focus back to finding her ultimate survival guide. Flipping through a massive encyclopedia, she frantically searches for the Holy Heroes Nursery School. Meanwhile, Erno sits right next to her, casually watching as she excitedly spots the exact page she needs. She jumps back like a startled cat when he suddenly speaks, noting that she seems to know her way around this huge library pretty well. Then he drops a trap question, asking exactly what she's reading. She breaks into a cold sweat, knowing she absolutely cannot get caught plotting her escape plan right now. Turning on the charm, she hugs the heavy book and claims she's just practicing her reading and writing. She laughs nervously, adding that even though she doesn't understand the big words, it's just super fun to look at. Erno gives her a highly skeptical look, simply replying with a drawn-out okay. She quickly scurries away with the book, but in her panic, she accidentally knocks a notebook off a nearby desk. In a flash, she realizes this exact type of clumsiness is why Iron's lineage was questioned in the first place, proving she supposedly isn't a real Etam. Suddenly, her dress drops completely flat to the floor like a deflated balloon. And from underneath the fabric pops a tiny, pink, lizard-like dragon. It turns out she actually is a true dragon descendant after all. She suddenly remembers that in the novel, Iron couldn't control her powers and transformed at the New Year's party, causing everyone to totally freak out. But right now, she faces a massive problem. She has zero idea how to turn back into a human. Panicking, her little dragon body scrambles across the floor to hide behind the bookshelf before anyone sees her. Hiding with tears in her big eyes, she suddenly spots a shiny ring lying on the floorboards. She picks it up with her tiny claws, marveling at how incredibly expensive it looks. But as she sniffs it, a very familiar and dangerous scent hits her senses. On the other side of the shelf, Erno uses magic to casually levitate a book into his hand. He glances down and notices her little pink dragon tail sticking out from the corner. Walking over, he stares silently at the suspicious pile of clothes left on the floor. Just as he narrows his eyes, a poof of magic erupts from under the fabric like a smoke bomb. He watches quietly as the lump under the dress scrambles around frantically. Erno just smirks, highly amused by whatever weird stunt she's pulling. She finally pops her head out, back in her human form, and he casually asks what kind of game she's playing. With a bright, innocent grin, she holds up the ring and claims she was just picking it up for him. Internally, she is sweating bullets, realizing she was a split second away from getting totally busted. She thanks her lucky stars she managed to dive back under her clothes and transform right at the buzzer. Now she just needs to play it completely cool and brush off the situation naturally. She politely hands the ring back to Erno, smoothly lying that it rolled under the shelf and she just crawled down to clean it off for him. Erno holds the shiny ring in his palm, genuinely impressed by how spotless she got it. He explains that the ring is incredibly important to him, mildly surprised she went through the trouble of crawling around to find it. Chuckling nervously, Iron suggests they just swap the ring and call it a day so she can retreat to her room. Knowing he absolutely hates physical contact, she carefully hovers her hands over his to avoid brushing his skin. The tiny piece of jewelry clinks safely into his palm. Suddenly, Erno channels a burst of magic, making the ring sparkle brightly with a strange aura. She shoots him a confused glance, wondering what he's up to. But taking her chance, she quietly excuses herself and slowly backs out of the room. Honestly, she's kind of thrilled she pulled off such a massive save without blowing her cover. Cut to the next day, the massive Etam Mansion Grand Banquet Hall is fully prepped and glowing for the New Year's party. Iron walks in, absolutely mind-blown to see the entire extended family actually gathered in one spot. Everyone is dressed to the nines, looking like literal royalty straight out of a fantasy novel. She shudders, realizing how terrifying it must have been for the original Iron to accidentally turn into a dragon in front of all these judgmental snobs. But she firmly hypes herself up, deciding that she's in complete control of her story now. She's got absolutely nothing to worry about. Flashback to last night. She spent hours scurrying around the dark mansion in her dragon form, hoarding emergency cash like a tiny loot goblin. She's super confident that even if she transforms by accident, she can just grab her secret stash and bolt to the orphanage. Suddenly, a booming voice echoes through the hall, instantly silencing the crowd. The guards announce the defender of the Empire and the 12th dragon. Duke Myril Etam has officially entered the building. The imposing head of the family takes his seat on the throne, officially kicking off the gathering with a totally majestic vibe. Standing right beside him is Erno Etam, looking as flawless as ever. On the other side is the second son, Selian Etam, stretching his arms and already complaining loudly about how bored he is. Iron watches the trio nervously from the back of the room. Among all the relatives, these three have the thickest and most powerful dragon bloodline in the entire family. Just their mere presence is enough to make the air in the room feel heavy and suffocating. Out of nowhere, the nobles around Iron start whispering in total shock. She breaks into a cold sweat when she realizes Erno just greeted her, and now all eyes are laser-focused on her. To avoid drawing even more unwanted attention, she flashes an awkward smile and gives him a tiny, hesitant wave. Meanwhile, up at the throne, the Duke's aide steps forward to begin the official proceedings. He flips through his clipboard, ready to call the very first name. A nervous guy named Wiln is summoned to the front, sweating bullets as he steps up to the royal rug. He awkwardly greets the Duke, looking like he's about to literally pass out. Iron suddenly remembers the true purpose of this New Year's gathering. It's not a party, it's a mandatory meeting where every family member has to present their annual business plans. Wiln excitedly pitches a newly discovered plant from the eastern continent. He starts rambling about its calming scent, but the Duke completely shuts him down mid-sentence. The Duke coldly asks if Wiln even bothered to read the family's past research archives. Without hesitating, the Duke chucks a massive stack of papers right at Wiln's head, absolutely roasting him for presenting outdated trash. The Duke ruthlessly tears into him, asking what a guy who blows all his research funds at fancy bars would actually know. The aide mercilessly joins in, loudly exposing Wiln for racking up debt and harassing women on the family's dime. The Duke's eyes glow with a terrifying purple aura as he dares Wiln to point out a single lie. Trembling in pure terror, Wiln stammers helplessly while the Duke darkly questions why he should even keep him alive. Wiln begs for mercy and completely folds like a cheap lawn chair, passing out flat on the floor. Iron watches in horror, realizing this so-called gathering is actually a brutal public execution of the family's dead weight. She sarcastically notes that the Duke really cares about his family, tossing out the garbage with zero hesitation. The aide coldly steps over Wiln and calls up the next victim, and then the next. Iron starts hyperventilating, terrified that her name is going to be called to the chopping block next. She tries to desperately cope, convincing herself that there are way too many people here for them to bother targeting a 5-year-old. But her hopes are instantly shattered when the Duke points right at her, demanding Erno tell him exactly who this little fluff is. The Duke looks down at her, struggling to remember her name before settling on calling her Island. Still terrified, she gets put on the spot and asked about her grand plans for the new year. Internally, she's screaming about just packing up and escaping to the orphanage. But out loud, she has to actually give a solid answer to the terrifying head of the family. She stammers, totally struggling to form a coherent sentence under all the insane pressure. Finally, she blurts out that she wants to leave the house without being interrupted. The entire hall goes dead silent, and the surrounding nobles immediately start whispering like crazy. The Duke raises an eyebrow, asking exactly why she wants to pack her bags so suddenly. She mentally smacks herself, realizing she almost blurted out that she knows the secret of her birth. Erno completely catches her slip-up, stepping in to smoothly ask what secret she's hiding. He leans in, demanding to hear the truth while she sweats absolute bullets. She internally cries, realizing her public speaking skills are absolute garbage when she's stressed. Just as she's about to face the firing squad, heavy boots stomp frantically into the hall. A panicked guard crashes the party, screaming that the floating stone mine just collapsed. He reports that while there are no deaths yet, several workers and a manager are trapped inside the rubble. The Duke pinches the bridge of his nose, stressed out of his mind by the massive disaster. Without missing a beat, the Duke postpones the gathering, ordering everyone to stay inside the mansion. He starts pointing into the crowd, drafting a rescue squad on the spot. He barks at them to shut up, get ready, and follow him to the mines immediately. Erno instantly summons his glowing sword, ready to slice through the rubble like butter. Iron stands alone in the middle of the chaos, while some random guy next to her starts completely bawling. Suddenly, Erno points his finger right at her. She flinches, convinced she's about to catch some stray punishment. But instead, he totally catches her off guard by tossing a handkerchief her way. She wipes her tears, frantically trying to figure out if they're actually mad at her or not. Erno then casually asks the crying dude if he needs to borrow a tissue too. Iron clutches the cloth, genuinely touched by this super rare moment of kindness. The other nobles quickly scramble to offer their own handkerchiefs to the sobbing guy. She smiles, thinking maybe this terrifying family isn't so bad after all. That is, until the Duke snaps at her, warning her that she's up first at the next meeting. When she asks if she's coming along to the rescue, the Duke brutally roasts her, saying a fluffy thing like her wouldn't even make good cow food. She completely blue screens, traumatized by the thought of being fed to livestock. As the Duke walks away, he coldly tells her to mind her own business. But in her panic state, she accidentally calls out to him. And to her absolute horror, she realizes she just called the cold-blooded Duke grandfather. She braces for impact, completely convinced he's going to obliterate her on the spot. But instead of backing down, she doubles down, flashing a massive smile and yelling "Grandpa" again. The Duke stops dead in his tracks, absolutely stunned. He actually flinches, muttering the word "grandpa" under his breath like he's never heard it before. Iron sweats, wondering if she just made the biggest mistake of her life. But the Duke just swishes his cape, brushing her off with a sigh. He warns her to be fully prepared because he's going to strictly inspect her next time. With a final farewell, he turns and marches out. Iron watches him leave, his ominous words echoing in her mind. She stares at their retreating backs, genuinely wondering if he meant he's going to kill her next time. Cut to the next day, she's sitting on a garden bench, totally stressed because she can't find a decent escape route. She cringes into a ball, mentally replaying her super embarrassing grandpa stunt. Suddenly, something smacks the top of her head. She looks down and spots a crumpled little paper ball, wondering if the wind blew it. But before she can even process its smack, another paper ball gets yeeted directly at her face. She turns around to see two bratty noble kids harassing her and throwing crumpled paper at her head. They loudly mock her for sitting all alone, teasing that she has absolutely no friends or home to go to. She calmly sighs, casually warning them that she's just going to throw whatever they toss at her right back. But the kids just keep running their mouths, claiming she lacks basic home education. They maliciously joke about how she's completely parentless. One of the brats smirks, saying his mom explicitly told him to avoid orphans like the plague. They keep ganging up on her, asking what an outcast like her could possibly even have. Then they start absolutely cracking up over the rumors of her secret birth. The main bully wipes a tear from his eye, finding his own cruel jokes completely hilarious. Suddenly, his buddy taps his shoulder, stammering and pointing right behind him. He turns around, totally confused by the weird, massive shadow looming over his head. Iron is literally hoisting a giant, heavy boulder over her head with glowing eyes, looking like an absolute menace. The bully freezes, his face going completely pale in sheer terror. The kids instantly freak out, screaming that she's crazy and threatening to tattle to their mom. But Iron brutally snaps back, yelling that having no parents is way better than having a garbage personality like theirs. Calling her a trashy thing, the boys quickly scramble to escape before they get crushed. They throw one last insult over their shoulders, calling her pitiful because her own sad life is all she has. As they run, Iron actually agrees, thinking she really must look a little crazy right now. She hurls the giant rock to the side, yelling that they're just brainless amoebas for not understanding property damage. But once they're gone, the adrenaline wears off, and she sadly admits to herself that she really is pitiful. Dark flashbacks of her past life hit her, remembering how her brothers were constantly humiliated just by her presence. Her mother entirely ignored her existence, focusing all her energy and money on the golden children. Her mom happily gifted expensive real estate to her sons while literally banishing Iron to a cheap school dorm. She realizes the ugly duckling trope isn't just a fairy tale, it's exactly what happens when the powerless get stomped on by the strong. In her past life, she was so thoroughly neglected that every single problem was magically blamed on her. She eventually just gave up fighting back, letting herself become the family's eternal punching bag. Suddenly, a soft meow snaps her out of her depressing thoughts as a cute little stray cat wanders up. She crouches down, gently asking the fluffy stray if it wants to be her friend. Giving it a soft pet, she quietly tells the cat they can just chill here and talk sometimes. She starts panicking slightly, wondering if those noble brats will actually demand compensation money for the rock-throwing stunt. Seeking comfort, she strokes the purring cat and asks if it wants to officially move in with her. But out of nowhere, the cat suddenly whips its head around. It bolts right into the nearby bushes without a second thought. Iron looks over and sees the stray happily reuniting with a whole litter of adorable kittens. Watching them play, she smiles bitterly, realizing that even the street cat has a loving family. Shaking off the gloom, she decides to act her age and go hunt down Mela for some sweet pudding to boost her mood. She cheerfully waves goodbye to the little feline family. Meanwhile, high up in the mansion, someone is watching her every single move from a window. It's Erno, leaning casually against the frame and amusedly calling her a funny girl. He totally caught the entire interaction with the bullies from start to finish. Seeing a tiny 5-year-old girl effortlessly heft a giant boulder to absolutely terrify her haters completely caught him off guard. Later, Iron casually strolls down the sunlit hallway, lost in her own thoughts about her grand escape plan. She knows that native members of the Etam family are deeply obsessed with their noble status. They will do absolutely anything to cling to the family's immense wealth and power. So the idea of an illegitimate child willingly packing up and leaving is completely unimaginable to them. Spotting Erno standing quietly by the doors, she realizes that if she hadn't found his ring, he probably would have ignored her forever. A flashback replays in her mind of the moment she handed him the shiny piece of jewelry. She remembers gently dropping the pristine ring right into his palm. The artifact had sparkled brightly in his hand, radiating a very strange, mystical aura. And Iron realizes the magical energy pulsing from that ring was completely undeniable. Erno watches her from the window with a smirk, highly amused that a kid with such raw power actually wants to run away from home. Since she's officially caught his interest, he decides it's time to give her a little present. His magical ring glows as he casually decides to teach those stuck-up noble parents a brutal lesson for raising such terrible brats. Fast forward 1 week, the dust has settled, and the postponed New Year's gathering is finally back on. The Grand Edam crest hangs proudly as everyone files back into the massive banquet hall. Iron stands nervously in the center of the room, right where they left off before the mine collapse. The Duke glares down from his throne, demanding she finally spill the beans about why she wants to pack her bags. He challenges her to speak up, leaving her sweating absolute bullets under his intense stare. Glancing around, she notices the nobles eagerly leaning in, treating her life like the season finale of a juicy reality show. But she hypes herself up, remembering her secret stash of gold coins means she's fully prepared to bolt if things go south. When the Duke demands the truth, she accidentally blurts out her rehearsed lie, calling him grandpa and claiming to be his son's secret daughter. The Duke is completely stunned, but before Iron can correct herself, heavy footsteps pull up right beside her. It's Erno. He steps right into the spotlight, casually announcing that he should clear things up. With a completely straight face, he smiles and claims that he is actually her father. Iron's brain entirely short-circuits, completely blindsided by this insane curveball. Her inner dragon form is screaming in sheer panic, wondering if she's even gonna live to see tomorrow. She knows Erno's lore from the novel. He's a notorious hedonist who only cares about his own amusement. If something doesn't spark his interest, he literally won't lift a single finger. He treats everyone around him like completely disposable chess pieces. And the second he gets bored of playing with his toys, he absolutely destroys them so no one else can have them. Realizing she's officially caught his terrifying attention, she awkwardly stares up at him in pure disbelief. The Duke is absolutely furious, yelling at Erno to quit making bad jokes and step down. But Erno just laughs it off, asking when he ever cared about his standing in the family. He shamelessly claims he's just here to watch his daughter, while Iron internally screams that she is definitely not his kid. She glares at him, completely frustrated because his little prank is totally ruining her master escape plan. The tension between Erno and the Duke gets so thick it feels like a literal dragon and tiger are clashing in the room. Completely unfazed by his father's rage, Erno smoothly doubles down on his lie. He confidently tells the Duke to just ask his daughter, leaving Iron's inner dragon freaking out. The Duke shouts about how incredibly suspicious this all is, while Iron glares at Erno for being so absolutely shameless. Erno kneels down, flashing a dazzling smile, and asks her to tell everyone exactly who he is to her. Cornered in front of the entire noble court, she nervously stammers, trying to figure out her next move. Knowing she has no choice, she awkwardly confirms he's her dad, sending the Duke into an absolute screaming meltdown. The Duke completely loses it, chewing Erno out for suddenly adopting a random kid out of nowhere. He angrily points at Iron, utterly disgusted that his son picked up such a fluffy thing. Meanwhile, the peanut gallery starts gossiping, recalling how Erno randomly brought home a boy last year too. The nobles place bets, confidently predicting this new kid will get booted to the curb in just a few months. Iron listens to their toxic whispers, totally annoyed that everyone is treating her life like cheap entertainment. She remembers that in the original novel, Erno treated his adoptive kids as strictly business. He wasn't exactly abusive, but he tossed them aside the second they lost their usefulness. Even when he adopted the original heroine, it was totally transactional and lacked any real warmth. It was basically just a super strict contract out of necessity. The noblewomen sneer, whispering how sorry they feel for her doomed future. But Iron's eyes suddenly widen as a crucial detail from the novel hits her like a freight train. Whenever Erno formally kicks an adopted kid out, he pays them massive severance money just to keep them quiet. Realizing the golden opportunity falling right into her lap, her face lights up with absolute greed. If she just plays along and gets fired in 6 months, she can secure enough cash to buy her very own private island. She instantly imagines her glorious retirement, chilling on a tropical beach with a cute cat and zero worries. Her mind is completely blown that such a ridiculously high-paying, short-term gig actually exists in this world. Clenching her tiny fist with total determination, she locks onto Erno, fully ready to exploit this rich guy for the ultimate payout. Looking at Erno's gentle smile, Iron wonders if he might actually be a good person deep down. He stares back at her, totally amused by her intense focus. Without warning, he easily scoops her up into his arms. He confidently announces that his only plan for the new year is to be a good father to his newly reunited daughter. The Duke absolutely blows a gasket, screaming that a guy who is a terrible kid has zero right to play house. Erno just sighs, calmly telling the old man to keep his voice down before he scares the poor girl. But Iron quickly shakes her head, totally playing up her innocent act. She boldly declares that she isn't scared at all because her grandpa is super cool. Pouting cutely, she begs the Duke to stop being so angry. The Duke completely short-circuits, his tough exterior instantly melting. Blushing hard, he frantically stammers that he was never even mad in the first place, leaving the others trying not to laugh. Unable to handle the overwhelming cuteness, the Duke throws his hands up in defeat. He abruptly dismisses the entire New Year's party, telling everyone to just drop their reports off at his room later. The rest of the family watches in sheer disbelief as the fearsome Duke retreats. He grumbles under his breath the whole way out, desperately trying to salvage his pride. With the meeting adjourned, Erno smiles down at Iron and decides it's time for them to head home too. And just like that, the chaotic New Year's gathering finally comes to an end. As they walk down the massive halls, Iron fully processes that she's officially Erno's fake daughter. But she starts getting anxious, wondering how long he plans to physically carry her. She completely expected him to just drop the act and toss her aside like a ragdoll the second they left the banquet hall. Instead, he holds her securely, treating her like she's the most precious thing in the world. Iron buries her face in his shoulder, realizing this exact charm is why people always clung to him. But her survival instincts kick in, reminding her that she's basically just a shiny new toy on his chessboard. She tells herself to play her part perfectly, collect her massive payout, and leave the second the game is over. She desperately repeats this mantra in her head to protect her own heart. Past trauma reminds her that if she keeps her expectations at zero, she won't get emotionally wrecked when he eventually abandons her. So she hugs him back tightly, mentally preparing for the day it all ends. Fast forward 1 week, Erno greets her warmly in his own luxurious mansion. He gently pats her head, giving her the softest morning wake-up call ever. Iron peeks open one eye, slightly annoyed that he literally looks flawlessly handsome first thing in the morning. It's been a week since the chaotic party, where the entire noble court was left completely flabbergasted by Erno's sudden adoption announcement. Since bringing her home, he's treated her like absolute royalty, giving her a massive bedroom all to herself. He even personally wakes her up every single day to make sure she eats. Iron stares at the giant breakfast spread he whipped up, totally overwhelmed by the portions. Her 23-year-old soul is crying inside as this incredibly powerful man literally spoon-feeds her like a toddler. Erno asks if there's absolutely anything she wants for the day. Chewing on her bread like a little hamster, she notes that he asks her this exact same question every single morning. She wonders if she should ask for her old maid, Mela, or just play the spoiled brat and demand expensive toys. But honestly, she has her eyes on a much bigger prize. She confidently asks him to open a bank account for her, and he instantly agrees without a second thought. For her master escape plan, setting up a secure financial safety net is just common sense. In this fantasy world, the Magic Tower runs the banking system, and they don't use flimsy paper books. Instead, they issue enchanted lockboxes protected by triple-layered magical barriers that only the true owner can open. Iron notes that Erno is acting so incredibly sweet, like he'd literally pluck a star from the sky for her. But her deeply traumatized adult soul refuses to buy into it. She tells herself he didn't actually adopt her out of love, and his endless generosity is probably just him trying to pay her off early. Still, she happily flashes a bright smile, totally fine with just soaking up all his money while the gig lasts. She reminds herself that this is all just a stage play, and she is playing the role of the cute, obedient extra to perfection. She vows to just keep her head down and patiently wait for the inevitable day he kicks her out. And getting that magical bank account is crucial, because if she gets booted with raw cash, she'll be a walking ATM for every thug in the city. Erno smirks to himself, fully realizing that his fake daughter is secretly plotting her grand escape. Surprisingly, he agrees to help her out, casually mentioning that setting up a bank account is a piece of cake. Reaching out his hand, he asks if she wants to head out right away. Iron is absolutely mesmerized as she steps outside the mansion in an adorable new dress. She gazes around the bustling streets in total awe, completely mind-blown since it's her first time ever leaving the estate. Spotting a toy store, Erno points it out and asks if she wants to go inside. But Iron just smiles and waves it off, insisting she doesn't need toys and that a loaded bank account is more than enough. Internally, she reasons that parents who actually care about their kids don't just buy their love with toys. Plus, having been totally neglected in her past life, she doesn't even know how to play with them anyway. Instead of taking no for an answer, Erno suddenly swoops her up into the air. He kicks open the doors to the toy store and completely crashes the place. With a smug grin, he tells everyone he's worried because his daughter doesn't seem to have any greed. The shop owner rushes over, totally confused by the sudden commotion. Erno doesn't even let the guy finish his sentence before reaching into his coat. Without hesitating, he tosses a massive bag of 50 gold coins right at the owner. He straight up orders the guy to give him every single toy in the store, making Iron absolutely panic. She desperately tries to stop him, but Erno just casually tells her to throw away whatever she doesn't like. When he playfully threatens to pick them out for her, she realizes this guy is completely unhinged. Sweating bullets, she quickly agrees to just choose a toy before he literally buys the whole building. Iron wanders through the aisles, marveling at the insane variety of magical toys. But deep down, her adult soul is crying, wishing he had just handed her that bag of gold instead. Erno teasingly asks if she'd rather just own the shop, prompting her to frantically make her choice. She wanders back with a gloomy look, feeling like this whole trip is a massive waste of money. But then a clever idea suddenly pops into her head. She holds up a grumpy-looking black tiger doll and proudly declares it as her favorite. Erno asks if she's sure she only wants one, warning her she might get bored quickly. But Iron just squishes the plushie right in his face. Flashing her biggest, most innocent smile, she tells him she picked it because it looks exactly like him. She hugs the doll tightly, turning up the cuteness dial to 11. And it works perfectly. Erno is visibly moved, totally eating out of the palm of her hand. He sighs fondly, acting like he has absolutely no choice since his daughter only loves the toy that resembles him. Iron smirks internally, celebrating her flawless manipulation tactics. But then Erno turns to the shopkeeper and asks how many of these specific dolls are left in stock. The owner happily replies that they're a brand new release, making Iron the very first buyer. Satisfied with that answer, Erno casually snaps his fingers, and the entire display of tiger dolls instantly goes up in flames. The owner absolutely loses his mind, screaming as his newest product line burns to a crisp. As the guy frantically yells for water, Erno brutally chucks a massive bag of gold right into his face. He calmly explains that the magic fire will only burn those specific dolls and leave the rest of the store untouched. Glancing over his shoulder, he drops a terrifying warning, telling the owner to never sell that doll again. The shopkeeper and his staff freeze, realizing they are dealing with an absolute psycho. But seeing the massive payout in his hands, the owner immediately bows down and praises Erno like a god. Walking out with Iron, Erno smirks, proudly declaring that his daughter is now the only person in the world who owns that doll. He holds her close and asks if she's happy, while Iron just nods, absolutely terrified by his insane flex. Leaving the chaotic store behind, they head out to continue their day. Next up, Erno treats her to a super fancy, delicious dessert. They sit together and Iron happily enjoys the sweet pudding. But she can't help but sweat nervously, wondering why she has to eat under his intense, heavy aura. Meanwhile, back at the estate, it's time for the Etam family's bi-weekly regular meeting. It's a massive gathering where they discuss business, territory management, and ongoing projects. All the important vassals are present, and Duke Myril is looking exceptionally sharp and completely ruthless today. Suddenly, Erno slams his fist down with a massive bang. He casually participates in the high-stakes family meeting while letting Iron enjoy her snack time right on his lap. Seeing the Duke getting visibly annoyed, Iron quickly drops her spoon. She turns on the puppy dog eyes, promising to be a good girl if her grandpa doesn't scold them. The Duke's cold, intimidating exterior shatters instantly. He is completely disarmed by the fluffy little kid's sweet talk. He immediately caves, telling her she can eat 10 or 20 puddings if she wants to. Erno smirks at his father's totally whipped reaction, telling his daughter to keep eating. Iron scoops up a big bite of her wobbly jelly pudding. She happily munches away, completely unaware of her own power. The dessert is absolutely delicious. The Duke and his stuffy noble vassals literally have stars in their eyes from the insane cuteness overload. After the wholesome break, the meeting shifts back to serious business regarding weapon exports to Kharkov. The vassals nervously report that while orders are flooding in, their raw materials are completely drying up. They are desperately running out of floating stones, causing their weapon quality to violently tank. The men stress over the failing mine search while Erno casually wipes Iron's mouth. Hearing the words floating stone, Iron stops mid-chew. Her internal lore wiki lights up. In the original novel, this anti-gravity rock is a massively important magical resource. According to the plot, there was a major incident where an undiscovered mine was found. It was located in the mountain right behind the Duke's massive estate. And the original female lead literally just stumbled upon it purely through insane main character luck. Iron realizes this is her ultimate golden ticket to fund her grand escape. She feels a tiny bit bad for stealing the heroine's future loot, but she absolutely needs this win. Playing completely dumb, she innocently asks Erno what a floating stone actually is. He explains it's a glowing rock that flies, and mixing it with iron makes weapons super light. Erno thinks it's a bit useless right now, but the vassals insist it's about to revolutionize warfare. Iron taps her chin, casually dropping a massive bomb by claiming she saw one flying in the sky. Bam! Erno suddenly punches the solid wood table. The Duke practically jumps out of his chair, demanding to know if she just said she saw a flying stone. Iron absolutely panics as Erno's casual punch literally slices the giant, thick table clean in half like a piece of paper. The desperate vassals crowd around her, practically begging for the exact coordinates. They panic, asking if it was just a toy and demanding she guide them. But Erno glares at them with terrifying, glowing eyes, warning them to watch their tone when speaking to his daughter. The Duke pushes the frantic men aside, taking control of the situation. He asks Iron gently exactly where she saw the magical rock. She confidently states it was on the mountain in the back. The Duke looks confused, asking her to point out exactly which hill she means. She points her tiny finger right out the window toward the estate's backyard. The Duke is completely mind-blown that a massive fortune is sitting right behind his own house. The vassals realize they never even bothered to check the back mountain because it seemed too obvious. With nothing to lose, the Duke immediately orders an expedition to check it out. Iron quietly celebrates her genius tactical move. But Erno stares at her with a highly suspicious smirk. He gently pats her head, clearly wondering how his 5-year-old magically knows so much top-secret intel. Suddenly, a panicked knight bursts into the hall, making a huge fuss. The Duke completely loses his patience, barking at the man for the constant interruptions. He glares down at the intruder, his mood absolutely souring. Having had enough chaos for one day, the Duke abruptly adjourns the meeting and kicks everyone out. As the vassals whisper in fear about the violently snapped table and the Duke's dark expression, Iron looks toward the door and completely freezes, because the original female lead has just entered the chat. Iron stares nervously, convinced that once the original heroine arrives, she'll be completely forgotten. Meanwhile, Erno watches her closely, totally curious about what's running through her tiny head. Snapping out of it, she slaps on a fake smile, desperately hoping he can't read her mind. Later that night, Erno gently tucks her into bed, asking if she enjoyed the pudding. He softly promises to give her absolutely anything she wants to eat, whenever she wants it. But internally, she reminds herself that this whole family act is just a temporary play. Once the real female lead shows up, she'll go back to being a nobody, but she's fully prepared for it. Erno wishes her sweet dreams with a warm, fatherly smile. She dutifully replies, wishing him a good night while pulling her blanket up tight. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a bright day where Iron stands outside a jaw-dropping mansion. Erno casually drops a bombshell, telling her the whole estate and 30 servants are entirely hers. And as the cherry on top, he hands her a massive check for 100 million gold. He smirks, telling her it's the massive payout he promised. But then his face goes completely dark and he coldly orders her to get out. Iron completely freezes, her heart dropping into her stomach. He sneers, saying if he had known she was a nasty dragon sooner, he would have kicked her out immediately. With a horrified screech, she involuntarily poofs right back into her tiny pink dragon form. Suddenly, she shoots up in bed, gasping for air. It was all just a brutal nightmare. She stares out the moonlit window, trying to calm her racing heart. The next morning, she gets dressed up in a gorgeous frilly gown, looking like an absolute princess. She nervously asks her maid, Mela, if the outfit actually suits her. Mela completely hypes her up, gushing over how adorable she looks in the new clothes. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoes from the door, startling them both. Mela hurries over to answer it while Iron waits anxiously. Gripping her tiger plushie for dear life, she excitedly assumes Erno is here to get her. She beams a massive smile, totally ready to greet her fake dad. But her smile instantly drops when she sees Erno's 2 terrifying sons standing in the doorway instead. The boys stare her down, their intense auras making her feel incredibly tiny. These are Erno's actual kids, Kalian and Cillian Etam. The red-haired brother Kalian crosses his arms, clearly annoyed that they were forced to come fetch her. And the dark-haired younger brother Cillian quietly agrees, matching his father's cold, calculating vibe. Kalian barks at her to hurry up because their father is waiting. As she follows them, her terrifying nightmare from last night flashes back into her mind. She remembers a crucial detail from the novel: Erno absolutely despises reptiles. She shivers, convinced that if they find out she's a dragon lizard hybrid, she's going to end up in a can of pet food. Snapping back to reality, she struggles to keep up with the brothers' crazy fast walking pace. She completely falls behind, panting heavily as the distance between them grows. Suddenly, both brothers stop and glare back at her with absolutely piercing eyes. Kalian aggressively insults her, calling her stupid and mocking her existence. Iron flinches but tries to play it off smoothly, apologizing for being so slow. She nervously tells them they can just go on ahead without her. But Cillian suddenly steps right into her personal space. She totally braces for a slap, squeezing her eyes shut. Instead, Kalian just aggressively plops his hand on her head, scolding her for silently struggling instead of just asking them to slow down. He sighs, grabbing her tiger plushie and ordering his brother to carry her. Without a word, Cillian scoops her right up, totally ignoring her complaints about being heavy. He effortlessly holds her, completely unbothered by her weight. Iron sits awkwardly in his arms, internally shocked that a young kid is built like an absolute tank. As they walk, Kalian seriously warns her not to get too attached to their father. He tells her straight up that Erno is just playing a twisted game, and she better guard her heart before she gets totally wrecked. Iron realizes Kalian is actually surprisingly sweet beneath his prickly exterior. She internally agrees not to stress over Erno's true feelings. Hopping down the hall, she feels totally at ease with the situation. After all, she has her own secret retirement plan to fall back on. Entering the dining room, Iron cheerfully spots Erno waiting for them. She dashes toward him, excitedly shouting that she missed him. Erno effortlessly scoops her up into a warm, protective hug. He immediately shoots the boys a suspicious glare, making sure they didn't upset his precious new daughter. Over breakfast, Erno casually mentions that the fearsome Duke Myril suddenly left the estate. Kalian guesses the Duke finally tracked down his runaway sister's kid. Squishing her cheeks, Iron quietly realizes the original novel's plot is officially kicking into gear. Erno shifts his attention back to Iron, asking if she likes her new plushie. Her eyes sparkle as she praises how soft and warm it is. She proudly declares they'll sleep together every night, melting Erno's icy heart. But suddenly, Erno's fond smile completely drops. The wholesome family moment is brutally interrupted as Erno collapses, desperately ordering Kalian to take Iron and run. Iron drops her toy in shock as the room trembles with dark energy. Kalian scoops her up, rushing away from his agonizing father. The text reveals the Edam family's darkest secret, a deadly monorage. It's known as Berserk, a horrific curse that drives them insane. Iron watches in horror, suddenly remembering this exact tragedy from the novel. Even with magic suppressors, Erno's curse was a ticking time bomb. The original story described this exact scenario playing out. During a family meal in the greenhouse, Erno completely lost control. He turned into an absolute menace, slaughtering dozens of innocent servants. As punishment for the massacre, Duke Myril showed absolutely no mercy. He locked Erno up in a literal dungeon, treating him like a rabid monster. Back in the present, Kalian holds onto Iron while Cillian is sent to evacuate the mansion. Iron watches Erno violently writhing on the floor, her heart aching at the sight. Refusing to give up, she desperately racks her brain for a solution. Then it hits her, she remembers a hidden cure from the novel. A rare plant growing in the warmest, shadiest part of the greenhouse. It's the only medicine that can successfully suppress the berserk state. As Kalian tearfully apologizes to his agonizing father, Iron makes her move. She completely dips out, breaking free from Kalian's grip and sprinting away. Kalian screams her name, terrified she's going to get herself killed. Iron knows it's absolutely wild to run off alone. But if Erno goes on probation, it's game over for her. Her dreams of a private island, a mansion, and massive payouts will vanish into thin air. Her lavish, easy life would crash and burn way too soon. Driven by the need to secure her bag, she pushes forward with fierce determination. Sprinting into the garden, she finally spots her target. Nestled in the warmest place under a massive blanket of shade, stands a lush tree covered in glowing red berries. Kalian catches up to her, stunned that they never noticed it before. He realizes his mother must have planted it here as a secret gift. A protective blessing left behind to save her family. Because these exact berries are the ultimate key ingredient for the berserk sedative. Ready to harvest her golden ticket, Iron urgently pulls off her little side pouch. But when she opens it, she completely freezes, because it's already stuffed to the brim with the massive pile of gold coins she's been secretly hoarding. Making the ultimate sacrifice, Iron dumps her entire secret stash of gold onto the ground, promising to secure the bag later. She carefully reaches up into the thorny branches, knowing she has to avoid getting pricked. Success, she manages to fill her empty pouch with the glowing red berries. Clutching her newly acquired cure, she spins around to sprint back to her father. But suddenly, she freezes dead in her tracks. A horrifying scream echoes all the way from the dining hall. She realizes with pure dread that the massacre has already started. Cut to the dining hall, where an absolutely berserk Erno is violently choking a servant who begs for his life. Iron bursts through the doors shouting for him, but Erno is already fully consumed by the madness, grinning like an absolute demon. She gasps, completely horrified by the chaotic, terrifying scene. But she tightens her tiny grip on the bag of berries, knowing Erno is the one truly suffering the most right now. She knows that being shunned and feared at your absolute lowest is the most miserable feeling in the world. Determined to save her golden ticket, she bravely marches straight toward the shadowy, monstrous Erno. Her discarded tiger plushie sits abandoned on the floor as she resolves to fix this. Suddenly, Kalian bursts into the room, screaming in pure panic. But it's too late. Erno has already snatched Iron up like a literal ragdoll. As Erno's dark mana flares out of control, Iron desperately shoves a handful of the red berries straight into his mouth. Erno violently crunches down, blood-red juice bursting from his lips. The sedative instantly kicks in, and Erno collapses backward, dropping Iron with a heavy thud. They both tumble to the floor, the terrifying dark aura finally completely fading away. Erno violently coughs and gasps for air as his sanity slowly returns. Iron ends up sitting right on his chest, totally unharmed but completely shaken by the wild ordeal. Frantically, she scrambles to pick up the scattered berries, muttering about how scary angry people are and trying to feed him more just to be safe. Tears well up in her huge golden eyes as the adrenaline crashes, crying that she doesn't want to see him like that ever again. Hearing her fragile voice, Erno regains his senses and gently grasps her hand. Iron's eyes widen in shock as she looks down at him. Through her tears, she begs him not to be angry, admitting she was absolutely terrified. Erno immediately pulls her into a tight, comforting embrace, his icy expression completely melting. He gently shushes her, assuring his precious daughter that he's not mad and everything is okay now. Iron's tears continue to fall as an overwhelming wave of relief washes over her. Exhausted from playing hero, her eyes slowly flutter shut. The scene focuses on her stuffed tiger plushie lying on the floor, questioning if the toy got wrecked in the scuffle. Suddenly, a flashback begins, discussing how children are entirely blind to their parents' faults. No matter how terrified they are, a child will always offer endless affection simply because you're their parent. In the past, Erno sits beside a red-haired woman in bed, casually reading a book while calling her worldview stupidly optimistic. He teases her for being an ideal romanticist, but she insists that meeting a child like that will change him forever. The woman playfully pouts, declaring that a cute daughter is the absolute best and teasing that Erno would totally fold for a little girl, though he quickly dismisses it. She gently rubs her pregnant belly, smiling warmly as she explains that there are just some people in this world you can't help but love. She softly tells Erno that this child might just be the one to completely flip his universe upside down. Looking at him with deep affection, she hopes he won't be lonely anymore. But the narration drops a heavy truth bomb. She never actually gave birth to that third child. Snapping back to the present, Kalian frantically runs up to his fallen father, demanding to know if he's okay. Erno looks down at the sleeping Iron in his arms, deeply relieved that she isn't seriously hurt. Kalian starts absolutely losing his mind, furiously scolding Erno for losing control, but suddenly stops himself. He looks around the wrecked dining room, realizing that normally this situation ends way worse. Usually, Erno is surrounded by terrified servants looking at him like a total monster as they run for their lives. Because once the berserk state fully kicks in, there's originally no way to stop it unless the Duke himself steps in to physically knock Erno out cold. But this time was different. Instead of running away, this tiny, fearless kid marched straight into the danger. And as Erno looks at Iron's peacefully sleeping face, he realizes she might just be the very daughter his late wife promised would change his world. The door creaks open as Cillian carefully peeks into the room, asking if Iron is all right. Seeing the calm aftermath, he asks his brother how on earth he managed to stop the berserk mode. Kalian brushes off the question for later, tossing Cillian the pouch of berries. He orders his little brother to gather more of them and take them straight to the lab. Without questioning it, Cillian immediately bolts off to get it done. Left alone, Kalian lets out a massive sigh of relief. He's just incredibly thankful that nobody ended up in a body bag today. Turning back to his father, he asks if that little fruit was really the cure. Erno stares down at the sleeping Iron, confirming that it definitely did the trick. He wonders aloud how this tiny child knew about the exact plant he'd been hunting for. Kalian notes that the kid is practically a walking mystery. But then Kalian stands up, his expression hardening. He sternly tells his dad it's time to drop this fake adoption prank. He points out that Iron just saved his life, and Erno already signed a contract with someone else last year anyway. Kalian insists that this girl is completely different from his past temporary kids. But Erno immediately shuts him down, coldly telling him to mind his own business. He flashes those terrifying, glowing red eyes, warning his son not to test his patience. Knowing better than to poke the bear, Kalian bows his head and makes a quick exit. Fast forward a bit, and Iron is tucked into a massive bed, completely knocked out while maids tend to her fever. Erno watches over her in silence, his mind drifting to a memory. He pictures his late wife, Iri, flashing him her warm, radiant smile. Looking down at Iron, he realizes this must be exactly the kind of miracle Iri was talking about. Suddenly, Iron's eyes snap open. She shoots up from the pillows, screaming in absolute panic about her abandoned stash of gold. Mela the maid nearly jumps out of her skin, overjoyed that Iron is finally awake. She tearfully explains that she was worried sick because Iron had been unconscious for a whole week. Iron is absolutely stunned, a full week in a coma. But as the shock wears off, a much bigger problem hits her. If a week has passed, that means a massive plot event has already happened. In a flashback, Iron remembers bumping into two maids outside. A fancy, dark-haired girl was politely asking them for directions to the Duke's office. The maids happily pointed the way to the second floor. After she left, they immediately started gossiping about how adorable she was, guessing she was the lost royal princess. Iron knows exactly who that girl is, the destined female lead of the original novel. With her sunshine personality and unique purification magic, she's practically universally loved. She's the only one meant to gradually melt Erno's frozen heart. At first, he'll only use her as a tool to cure his curse. But eventually, they'll grow closer, sharing meals and swapping gifts like a real family. She becomes the single most precious existence to the cold-blooded villain. In her past life, Iron remembers reading the story in her dark bedroom, totally captivated. She desperately wished she could be just like the beloved heroine. But she knows better now, dreams like that are just illusions. She accepts the harsh reality, she's just a fake extra, not the main character. Back in the present, Mela carefully scoops up a spoonful of warm soup for her. She happily tells Iron that her new brothers visited almost every day, and even the terrifying Duke demanded immediate updates. But when Iron asks about Erno, Mela nervously averts her eyes. She admits he only visited once, awkwardly making an excuse that he's probably just super busy. Then she drops the real nuke. The Duke brought the princess's daughter to the estate, and they're already discussing a permanent adoption. Iron's eyes go completely dull as her worst fears are confirmed. She's officially been replaced. Trying to lighten the heavy mood, Mela cheerfully feeds her the last bite of soup, telling her to eat up and get her strength back. As Iron quietly eats her soup, Mela smiles, wishing she had a daughter as calm and well-behaved as her. The maid happily admits she's incredibly grateful for this lavish lifestyle. Thanks to Iron, Mela secured a promotion, a fat pay raise, and gets to take care of a cute kid every single day. But suddenly, the lighting shifts, and Mela's expression turns intensely dark, internally urging Iron to keep listening to her exactly like this. Completely oblivious to the creepy vibe, Iron tilts her head as Mela announces that the time has finally come. It's time to get dressed up and face the fearsome Duke Myrl. Erno leads Iron to the grand office doors, and the Duke's heavy voice permits them to enter. Dressed in an adorable pink frilly dress, Iron nervously steps inside. Internally, she braces herself, reminding her past life self not to get her hopes up. She plans to just act completely normal and pretend nothing has changed. Peeking anxiously from behind Erno's leg, she spots something that makes her heart completely drop. She brightly greets her father and grandfather, but her eyes immediately lock onto the original heroine, Charn. The terrifying Duke welcomes his fluffy granddaughter, standing right next to the newly arrived female lad. Duke Myrl asks Erno if he's already interested in Charn. Iron forces a smile, trying to bury the stinging feeling of rejection. Changing the subject, the Duke mentions that Iron stepped up to help Erno while he was away. The Duke looks down at the tiny pink-haired girl, asking if she knows the meaning of the word price. He declares that anyone who does a good job deserves a fair reward, making Iron's ears instantly perk up. The Duke offers to grant her literally any wish, from exclusive business rights to becoming a direct descendant of the Edem family. The original heroine watches in shock as Iron's inner greed completely takes over. For Iron, the answer is an absolute no-brainer. Throwing her hands in the air, she confidently shouts money. With a massive grin, she politely demands 1 million roasts transferred straight to her bank account. Thanks to her novel knowledge, she knows the currency rate perfectly matches modern Korean won, making it an easy calculation. The Duke stares at her, repeating the amount in pure disbelief. Iron sweats, wondering if she pushed her luck. When he lets out a heavy sigh, she completely panics, thinking her price tag was too greedy even for a multimillionaire. But the Duke leans in, looking at her with total seriousness, asking if she truly thinks her actions were only worth that little. He gently takes her tiny hand, his aura glowing with power. He declares that the life-saving information she provided is worth way more than a measly million. Iron beams, imagining a sweet 100 million payout, happily thanking her grandfather. But then Erno scoops her up, scolding her for recklessly eating weird plants off the garden floor and calling her a crazy psychopath. Suddenly, her magical bank account notification goes off. Erno just casually deposited 1 billion into her account. Iron's brain absolutely short-circuits at the sheer amount of zeros. She stares up at Erno, no longer seeing a cold-blooded villain but a literal god of wealth showering her in cash. Annoyed by their antics, the Duke orders Erno to hurry up and finalize the adoption process for Charn. But Erno smirks, pulling Iron closer and telling his father he already made his choice incredibly clear. He admits that Charn's purification powers are definitely useful for the family's curse. But he looks softly at Iron, declaring that no matter how messed up a parent is, they don't want their own child to get hurt. Carrying Iron in his arms, Erno excuses himself from the room. Meanwhile, Iron convinces herself this was always the intended ending. In the hallway, Erno drops her off, telling her to go to her room and that he'll pick her up for dinner later. Left alone, Iron tries to rationalize the situation, reminding herself that an extra like her could never be his real daughter. She stares at her tiny hands, telling herself she's totally fine. She secured the bag and knows exactly which orphanage to escape to. She forces a bright smile, insisting that everything is perfectly fine. But deep down, her little heart aches, and she admits she's actually a little bit sad to leave. A maid spots her in the hall, surprised she's out of the meeting so early. Iron casually brushes it off, saying she just got her pocket money. She flashes a fake smile, claiming she's super tired and just needs a nap. Waving goodbye to Mela, she happily skips down the corridor. The maid offers to help, but Iron just keeps running, desperate to get away and process her feelings. As she disappears, Mela watches from the shadows with a completely sinister smirk. She mutters that it's a little earlier than planned, but it's finally time to fulfill her true mission. Meanwhile, Iron sneaks into an empty part of the mansion, checking to make sure the coast is completely clear. Leaning against the wall, she lets out a heavy sigh, completely lost and overwhelmed by her messy new reality. Iron imagines herself as a literal runaway lizard, fully convinced she's just a disposable extra. She secretly packs a tiny suitcase with her essentials, some candy, a book, and her trusty pouch. Her master plan, infiltrating the annex to recover some stolen goods before she totally dips out. She sneaks across the floor, eyeing scattered jewelry on the carpet. Thanks to her innocent 5-year-old disguise, she easily glides right past the guards without raising a single red flag. But suddenly, she spots Mela creeping down the hallway clutching a suspicious brown paper bag. Iron peeks around the corner, realizing her sweet maid is definitely hiding something. Her brain goes into overdrive as she considers searching the first floor to investigate. But she quickly backs out, knowing it's not the right time, and rushes back to her room. Her heart aches as she realizes tonight might be her final dinner with Erno. Cut to the next morning, Mela is cheerfully waking Iron up. Iron shoots up in bed, absolutely panicking because she totally missed her final dinner, but Mela casually mentions Erno couldn't even leave his room. When Iron asks why, Mela vaguely claims it's just due to sudden circumstances. Iron realizes she fell asleep in her day clothes, and Mela confirms Erno never went anywhere either. Iron remembers waiting for him in the annex until 9 o'clock before totally passing out. Looking at the original heroine, Charn, Iron sadly assumes she's already been replaced and forgotten. But Mela drops a bombshell. Erno is actually on strict probation. Iron is stunned. Mela admits she doesn't know all the tea, but the Duke was incredibly furious. A wave of relief washes over Iron as she realizes Erno didn't ditch her because he hated her. But she quickly smacks her own head, fiercely reminding herself not to catch feelings or expect anything from him. Shaking it off, she asks Mela if she can go visit him, and the maid happily agrees. Iron eagerly waves goodbye and absolutely bolts down the hallway. Arriving at Erno's room, she cautiously peeks through the heavy wooden door. Inside, the Duke is absolutely erupting, hurling burning papers into the fireplace and screaming at Erno for changing his mind. But Erno just flashes his signature cocky smile, casually telling his raging father to stay calm. The Duke calls him a bastard, but Erno effortlessly dismisses him, asking him to leave so he can chat with his daughter. The Duke's hand literally flares up with blazing magic, furious that he's being interrupted. Suddenly, Charn and Iron burst into the room. Erno immediately cuts his dad off, welcoming the girls in. Erno points to the little black tiger plushie hovering in the air, calling it his daughter's #1 treasure. Iron happily snatches the toy, relieved that it survived the wild scuffle completely unharmed. She beams up at her dad, thanking him and promising to carry it around even more. As Erno watches her fondly, the original heroine, Charn, intensely stares at Iron. Charn's eyes sparkle as she declares Iron is insanely cute and begs to rub her cheeks. Oblivious to the danger, Iron cheerfully gives her full permission. Charn immediately locks her in a death grip, aggressively squishing Iron's cheeks and squealing that they feel like soft milk bread. She completely loses her mind over the cuteness overload while Erno just watches from the couch. Struggling to breathe, Iron desperately tries to ask her older sister to pause for a second. Charn blinks in confusion at the word sister. Iron questions if she used the wrong title and Charn awkwardly apologizes, admitting she totally thought Iron was older. But that just makes Charn love her even more, and she violently tackles her into another massive hug. Iron literally fights for her life as Charn happily declares she's 8 years old, so Iron definitely has to call her big sister. Despite almost suffocating, Iron actually finds the hug super comforting, while Charn pouts that her grandpa should have introduced them way earlier. Later, Charn mentions she has to go out tonight to handle some business. Iron watches her, internally accepting that she has zero right to interfere now that the true heroine is taking center stage. She fiercely slaps her cheeks, snapping herself out of her delusional hopes. She reminds herself of the real reason Charn is here in the first place. Cut to an afternoon tea party, Iron watches the true main character happily munching on snacks. Iron asks if she's meeting Grandpa later, and Charn confirms she has an afternoon appointment with the Duke. Iron realizes the plot is moving forward. Charn is heading out to use her holy purification magic to calm the Etam family's rage. But before Iron can overthink it, Charn happily interrupts, scooping up a bite of pudding and offering to spoon-feed her cute new little sister. Charn happily holds up a spoonful of pudding, treating Iron like a total baby. As Charn tells her to say, "Ah," Iron flashes back to her exhausting past life as an overworked adult, making this pampering feel completely surreal. But she obediently takes the bite, savoring the sweet treat. Unable to handle the cuteness, Charn goes absolutely feral, squeezing Iron in a suffocating bear hug while the tiny girl begs for her life. After they settle down for tea, Iron internally admits she's genuinely glad Charn is here. Charn confesses that ever since arriving at the massive estate, she's felt incredibly anxious and out of place. But knowing Iron is going to be family makes it all better, as she excitedly lists off all the toys and food they'll get to enjoy. Then Charn drops a truth bomb. She doesn't actually care about being the terrifying Duke's daughter. She strictly came here because she needed a legal guardian. Iron is completely taken aback, wondering if the original heroine was always this practical. In the novel, Charn definitely didn't like Erno at first, but she wasn't this totally apathetic toward the family either. Iron guesses it's just because the story has barely started. She knows exactly what major plot points are coming up to push Charn and Erno closer together. And the very first massive event happens right after the heroine's arrival. The infamous theft of the dragon's relic. According to the lore, the Etam clan passes down 3 legendary relics that directly choose their rightful owners. The first is a massive, blazing sword, known as the Raging Flame, which currently belongs to Duke Myrl. The second relic is a stunning blue gemstone earring. And the third is a mystical, glowing dragon orb. The object destined to be stolen in this upcoming arc is the second relic. Known as the Balance Fragment, this earring magically stabilizes Erno's chaotic mental state early in the story. Losing this exact item is what causes Erno to spiral, giving the Duke the perfect excuse to lock him up. Once Charn steps in and solves the mystery of the stolen earring, her romance with Erno officially begins. But there's a huge problem. Iron completely blanks on the identity of the thief. Despite reading the novel 100 times, she can't remember who actually stole it, and debates if she should even interfere with the heroine's spotlight. Noticing her heavy sigh, Charn leans in, asking her new little sister what's wrong. She gently grabs Iron's hands, warmly promising to help her with absolutely any problem she has. Charn passionately declares that she already views Iron as a real sister and wants to tackle their worries together. Trying to cover up her panic, Iron nervously laughs and lies, claiming she was just thinking about what's for dinner. As they sit together in the sunlit room, Iron looks at the sweet girl, deeply hoping Charn gets her happy ending. She wants the heroine to live a life completely free of stress and worry. In her past life, Iron always admired Charn's perfect story. She loved watching this bright character receive endless affection from everyone around her. Iron looks her big sister in the eyes, silently vowing to make her even happier than the book ever did. She resolves to completely shatter the original plot, forcing Charn and Erno into an even closer, more intimate dynamic. Iron's eyes literally burst into flames with fierce determination, slightly startling Charn. Oblivious to Iron's master matchmaking plan, Charn just smiles brightly, thrilled that her little sister is in such a good mood. Later that night, the mansion goes completely quiet. Iron remembers that her emergency runaway luggage is still hidden deep inside her closet. The next morning, Mela approaches Iron in her room, casually asking if she's prepared a gift yet. Iron tilts her head, totally confused about what she's supposed to be gifting. Mela looks genuinely shocked that Iron is completely out of the loop. She drops the absolute bomb that today is Sir Erno's birthday. As Mela helps her get dressed, she insists that as Erno's only daughter, Iron needs to be the very first one to hand him a present. Iron racks her brain, trying to remember if this birthday event was ever mentioned in the original novel. Slipping on Iron's red shoes, Mela hints that there is one specific item that would make Erno incredibly happy. With a suspicious little smile, the maid suggests giving him the blue earrings he usually wears. Iron freezes as her thoughts from yesterday come crashing back. She knows that those earrings are actually the balance fragments needed to keep Erno from turning into a terrifying monster. And as the pieces finally click together, Iron realizes the person planning to steal the relic must be someone hiding right under their noses. Iron confidently tells Mela she knows exactly where the missing relic shards are. Internally, she reminds herself she's just a debt-ridden extra trying to secure the bag. But Mela has her own twisted agenda, thinking that finding the relic will guarantee Iron's adoption over Charn. Flashing a super creepy smile, the maid asks Iron to listen to a special request. The truth is finally revealed: the actual culprit who stole the relic is none other than Mela herself. She sinisterly asks the little girl to team up with her. Mela thinks she has this completely in the bag. She leans in, expecting her obedient little charge to blindly play along. But Iron absolutely shuts her down. She fiercely refuses, refusing to be an accomplice to a literal crime. Mela acts shocked, laying on a massive guilt trip about treating her so well. Iron ignores her, remembering Erno taught her that stealing is wrong. But Mela's mask drops and she threatens to expose Iron's ultimate secret. She knows the kid is actually a beastman. The maid reveals she saw Iron transform at the New Year's party. She then asks if Iron enjoyed that sweet cup of cocoa earlier. Iron's eyes go wide in horror as she realizes the hot chocolate was completely spiked. She feels totally cheated, realizing Mela deliberately poisoned her. But Iron figures this is just the universe forcing the original plot to happen. In the novel, the heroine is supposed to expose the thief, totally winning Erno's favor. Iron thinks she finally understands her true purpose in this world. But suddenly the drugs kick in and her vision completely blurs. Cursing her terrible luck, she collapses to the floor like a sack of potatoes. The narration explains tonight is the Quiet Night of the Dragon, a rare event where the Etam clan's insane powers weaken, forcing them to heavily increase security. Fast forward, a massive crowd of nobles is loudly gossiping in the main hall. They're whispering about someone getting revenge and dragging Mela's name into the mud. Iron stands nervously in the center of it all, clutching her plushie and wondering if she should just make a run for it. Suddenly, the head butler, Kylo, approaches her. He apologizes for the interruption but tells her she needs to come with him immediately. Iron accepts her fate, assuming her beastman's secret is about to be totally exposed. The heavy doors swing open, revealing a highly tense trial. She slowly walks up to the grand staircase, where the terrifying Duke orders her to answer him honestly. He drops an absolute bombshell, accusing Iron of colluding with criminals to steal Erno's earring. Iron stares up in pure shock, completely absolutely blindsided. Nearby, Mela is putting on an Oscar-worthy performance, fake crying about how she treated the girl so well. Iron realizes she got entirely thrown under the bus. Then the Duke brings up the second rumor: is she really a beastman? He glares down with terrifying red eyes, demanding a straight yes or no. Iron bravely admits she's a beastman but fiercely denies stealing the earring. But right in the middle of her defense, the dizziness strikes again. Her vision spins as the lingering drug completely takes over her tiny body. Realizing she's losing control, she collapses right in front of the entire Edam family. The crowd goes absolutely wild as Iron's human form straight up vanishes. A noble lady shrieks in horror, pointing at the floor. Iron has involuntarily transformed into her tiny, pink lizard form right in front of everyone. Panicking, Iron desperately scrambles away as the nobles shriek and scatter. They violently scream that a snake is loose in the hall. In the chaos, a cruel noble raises his boot, ready to stomp her out. Iron shrieks in absolute terror as the heavy shoe comes crashing down. To survive, she literally drops her own tail, leaving the severed piece behind as she frantically escapes. The crowd watches in disgust, openly mocking her as a filthy, low-class reptile. Their cruel words hit her right in the heart. Trapped and terrified, the tiny pink lizard bursts into tears, feeling entirely abandoned. But suddenly, Erno steps out of the crowd, completely ignoring the haters and gently holds his arms out for her to come home. Clinging desperately to the wall, Iron is convinced his dad must be super disappointed since he hates reptiles. Holding onto the stuffed doll Erno gave him, the tiny pink lizard thinks his life is officially over. He loses his grip and plummets straight down. Reaching out his little claws in panic, Iron questions if this is how he dies. He closes his eyes, fully expecting a massive concussion to end his suffering. But instead of splattering on the floor, he and his plushie land safely in the soft grass outside. A mysterious stranger scoops him up, casually asking where the little guy threw his tail. The purple-haired stranger looks down with a gentle smile, noting that they are both orphans in the same lonely boat. Gripping the terrified lizard, the stranger happily declares Iron is going to be their new pet. Meanwhile, back inside the grand hall, the chaos settles after a sudden blinding flash of light. The nobles murmur in absolute confusion while the traitorous maid Mela stands back to watch. She smirks wickedly, fully believing her master plan to frame and ruin Iron worked flawlessly. She prepares to slip away and return to her guild, thinking she just secured an easy win. But suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoes across the room. Without hesitating, Erno strikes, brutally slashing the maid and dropping her to the floor in a pool of blood. He steps over her writhing body, coldly stating that Iron is his son, and that's all the justification he needs. He swings his blade again, sending a massive, fiery shockwave tearing through the room. Erno is absolutely furious, his entire body radiating a terrifying blue fiery aura. He glares down at the trembling nobles, looking like a literal demon straight out of a nightmare. Duke Myril steps up, sweating bullets, and yells at Erno to chill out before he slaughters everyone. But Erno just wipes his bloody sword, sharply reminding his father that none of this would have happened if they hadn't held this stupid trial. The Duke barks back, arguing that the kid is just a filthy reptilian beast anyway. He insists the boy probably has zero trace of the prestigious Edem bloodline. Erno doesn't care, bluntly stating that Iron is his baby and that's final. He turns his back on the Duke, declaring he's leaving the estate to find his kid. The Duke demands to know where he's going, warning him not to go on a murderous rampage. Ignoring him entirely, Erno orders his loyal guard to track down his child as fast as humanly possible. Duke Myril shouts at him to stop, furiously insisting he's crossing the line this time. He glares at his son, completely shocked by his outright defiance over a fake child. Pointing to the heavily bleeding maid, the Duke says they need to interrogate her to get the truth. He argues that throwing a tantrum and threatening a clueless child isn't going to solve anything. Erno tells his father to stop talking nonsense and get out of his way. Leaving the messy trial behind, Erno storms out of the hall to hunt down his missing son. His loyal assistant vows to report the moment he gets a visual on the boy. The entire hall is left completely wrecked, with panicked nobles screaming for a doctor as the maid bleeds out on the red carpet. Back with the mysterious stranger, he leans on the table and decides to name his new lizard Bam Bam. Iron just stares, completely deadpan at the incredibly cringe name. He knows he urgently needs to explain he's actually a human child, not a stray reptile. Lying on a tiny makeshift bed of flowers, Iron dreads his new reality as a runaway pet. He shivers as he remembers the traumatic nightmare of the trial and how he passed out from the spiked cocoa. The stranger leans in with a sweet, innocent smile, gently asking if the little guy is okay. But Iron's meta-knowledge kicks in and he instantly recognizes the man. It's Richard Collin, the future master of the Magic Tower. Richard is notoriously known by novel readers as an absolute, irredeemable madman. He's the type of psycho who literally tortures people just to see how hard they'll beg for death. Iron realizes he just went from the frying pan straight into the hands of a sadistic villain. Richard rests his chin on his hands, happily declaring that since he saved Bam Bam, the lizard belongs to him forever. Sweating nervously, Iron realizes his fate might end up way worse than getting stepped on by a noble. He desperately flexes his tiny lizard muscles, praying to the heavens to transform back into a human. But absolutely nothing happens, and Richard leans closer, noticing the missing tail. Assuming Iron was violently bullied by other lizards, Richard casually mentions that all living things are naturally cruel to anyone who looks different. Iron glances up, noticing Richard looking totally miserable. The young mage clutches a crusty piece of bread, his eyes hidden by his purple hair. Watching a happy family walk by the window, Richard quietly mutters about how he has no parents left either. He reaches his hand out toward the tiny pink lizard, offering a gentle smile. Richard promises to raise Bam Bam to be super strong even if he is missing his tail. He vows to prove to the world that his new pet isn't inferior to anyone. Scooping Iron up, Richard excitedly announces that their hardcore training starts tomorrow. Iron sweats nervously, completely rejecting that idea in his head. Suddenly, the wooden door flies open with a massive crash. A tall, stern-looking man walks in, completely ignoring Richard screaming at him to knock. Iron realizes this guy is the academy principal. The principal crosses his arms, asking Richard why he skipped practice again today. He sighs, pointing out that even though Richard doesn't have any friends to train with, he still needs to put in the work. A stressed-out Richard grips Iron way too tightly, nearly squeezing the soul out of him. The principal spots Iron and firmly reminds Richard that pets are strictly banned in the dorms. Richard stammers, awkwardly trying to hide Iron behind a chair while claiming he was just hiccuping. The principal isn't buying it for a second and orders Richard to step aside. But Richard completely snaps, screaming that he won't let him take his new friend. He unleashes a blast of icy magic, directly threatening the principal and refusing to let anyone steal his stuff. Iron's meta-knowledge kicks in, and he remembers the hidden lore about this principal. Long ago, a gentle boy was chosen by the gods to raise his sword and protect the land. He became an absolute beast on the battlefield, bravely slicing off enemy heads and winning the war. But the aftermath was completely tragic. The hero's village was left in burning ruins. Having lost his wife and children to the slaughter, the broken hero abandoned everything and vanished into mourning. Legends said no one knew where the victorious hero disappeared to. But Iron realizes the legendary heartbroken hero is actually standing right in front of him. Back in reality, Richard and the principal are locked in a tense magical standoff. Iron panics, knowing this situation is about to go completely off the rails. Richard insists he can take care of the lizard perfectly well on his own. He desperately pleads with the principal, claiming he'll feed it well and keep it hidden. But at the exact same time, he sneakily uses his foot to slide Iron away. Iron goes skidding across the floor like a hockey puck, landing right at the principal's boots. The grizzled veteran stares down at the tiny pink reptile in total confusion. Knowing he has to act fast, Iron vigorously nods his head, literally begging to stay with maximum cuteness. Richard's jaw drops as he watches his pet perfectly understand human instructions. The principal strokes his chin, surprisingly intrigued by a lizard showing this much intelligence. Giving in, he tells Richard he can keep the weird creature for now. But he warns him to educate it properly before finally leaving the room for the night. The heavy door clicks shut, leaving Iron sighing in massive relief. Richard immediately drops to the floor, absolutely mind-blown as he interrogates Iron on how he just did that. His eyes sparkle with borderline obsession as he declares Iron is the most special lizard in the world. Lifting him high into the air, Richard happily announces that they are destined to be together forever. But then his smile turns completely psychotic as he whispers a dark warning. If Iron ever runs away, he'll chase him straight to hell. Iron breaks into a cold sweat, remembering that Richard Collin is literally the craziest sub-male lead in the entire novel. As the young mage hugs him tight, Iron just wants his overpowered, rich dad to come save him. The next day, Richard heads to the academy's bustling dining hall. He carefully packs a bowl of noodles and fresh fruit, fully intending to bring it all back for Iron. But a group of snobby noble kids watch him from a nearby table, whispering insults. They loudly complain about how unfair it is that a former slave gets a spacious single room and special treatment from the principal. Suddenly, one of the bullies aggressively slams a plate of messy food right onto Richard's tray, totally disrespecting him. Richard slowly turns his head, his eyes glowing with terrifying murderous intent as he tells the stupid pigs they're being way too noisy. Richard is absolutely not having it. He uses his magic to dump the messy spaghetti straight back onto the bully's head. He coldly demands the terrified noble repeat what he just said about him laying on the ground. Summoning a terrifying blast of ice magic, Richard prepares to remind the bully exactly who he's messing with. Suddenly, the principal steps in and intercepts the attack, firmly reminding Richard that using magic on people is strictly forbidden. Richard fiercely pushes back, yelling that the principal heard the insults too. The principal stays calm, warning the young mage that this kind of dangerous power can easily kill someone. But Richard completely snaps, screaming that he doesn't care because those nobles want him dead anyway. The principal's eyes widen in shock as he hears just how broken his student really is. Yanking his arm away, Richard violently shoves past the principal, crying that he doesn't understand anything. He storms out of the dining hall, completely ignoring the older man calling out his name. Meanwhile, back in the dorm room, Iron is waiting patiently, remembering Richard promised to bring back fruit. He perks up as the door opens, fully expecting his purple-haired kidnapper to walk in. But it's actually the principal, and he looks totally desperate for help. The older man explains that Richard ran away, leaving Iron completely shocked. The principal watches the tiny pink reptile's reaction, confirming his suspicion that this lizard definitely understands human language. He kneels down, holding out his hand, and asks the little guy to help him track down his missing student. Without missing a beat, the principal scoops Iron up and literally launches himself out the window. Soaring through the trees like a ninja, the principal asks if Iron can catch Richard's scent. Iron is absolutely terrified, flapping in the wind and clinging for dear life as they parkour through the forest. Sweating bullets, the tiny lizard panics, thinking he needs to survive this insane joyride before he can smell anything. They finally land safely on a high cliff overlooking a nearby village, which is Richard's usual hiding spot. The principal notices Iron trembling and asks if his lizard senses are just super sensitive. Deciding it's too risky inside the town, the principal drops down to the outskirts. He places Iron on some wooden crates, instructing him to search the perimeter while he checks the dangerous streets. He holds out a piece of cloth, telling the lizard to memorize his scent. He offers another cloth with Richard's scent, while Iron mentally screams that he's a reptile, not a bloodhound. But to Iron's absolute shock, his beastman senses actually work, revealing a glowing magical scent trail on the ground. The principal takes off, warning his little tracker to stick to the walls and stay safe. Surprised by how insanely good his nose is, Iron decides to follow the sparkling path. He scurries along the cobblestone paths like a little pink detective on a mission. The trail leads him to a lonely, glowing swing set under a massive tree, where he hears quiet sobbing. Richard looks down with teary eyes, completely stunned to see Bam Bam sitting in the grass. He asks if the little guy really came all this way just to find him. Iron collapses in exhaustion, feeling like he literally just bet his life on this rescue mission. Sitting alone on the swing, Richard apologizes for ditching him, explaining that some scumbags caused trouble today. He immediately flashes an evil smirk, noting he already dealt with them, heavily implying he tied the bullies up for a sick experiment. Richard then complains about another kid named Ash who keeps bragging about being adopted. He pouts, aggressively claiming he isn't jealous at all, even though he's clearly dying of envy. Staring off into the distance, the young mage starts to open up to his tiny pet. He wonders why his parents abandoned him, realizing that ordinary people are just naturally terrified of magicians. Looking completely broken, Richard whispers that it would have been better if he just disappeared from the world entirely. Iron stares at him, realizing that if this psycho just finds a loving family, he won't turn into the resentful madman from the novel. He knows giving Richard a better life will ultimately save a ton of people in the future. Filled with determination, Iron mentally vows to find the perfect family for this lonely villain. He energetically waves his little arms, trying to hype Richard up and show his support. Iron points frantically back toward the academy, trying to tell him the principal is worried sick. Richard just stares blankly, completely confused by the lizard's wild charades. But the gesture works. Richard gives a genuine, warm smile, thanking Bam Bam for coming to find him. He gently pets Iron's head, noting that this kind lizard is way better than any human. The touching moment is instantly ruined when Richard lets out a massive sneeze from sitting out in the cold. Richard completely freaks out, assuming his new pet lizard caught a nasty cold from a single, tiny sneeze. The principal glances out the window, noting the freezing wind, and suggests they immediately head back to the dorms. Walking through the quiet night streets, the principal drops some ridiculously heavy wisdom on his student. He darkly mutters that for some kids, it's honestly better to have never been born into this cruel world. He admits that sometimes disappearing right from the start saves a lot of pain. Staring at the academy, the veteran warrior confesses that if he had just vanished back then, he might actually be happier now. Back in the cozy dorm room, the principal notes that Bam Bam must be a nocturnal lizard since he's wide awake. Tucked safely into bed, Richard softly thanks the older man, admitting his life has really brightened up since they met. The principal watches the boy drift to sleep, seeing right through his tough, psycho exterior. He realizes that deep down, Richard is just a painfully lonely kid who gets relentlessly bullied for being a wizard's son. Turning to the tiny pink lizard, the principal shares a personal secret. He firmly believes Richard's parents didn't just toss him away like trash, since wizards are famously protective of their own bloodline. He asks Iron to keep a close eye on the boy and help fill the massive void in his heart. The older man sighs, awkwardly admitting that even after all these years, he still totally sucks at dealing with children. Looking at Richard's peaceful face, the grizzled principal wishes he could have just spoken his true feelings out loud. He softly calls the sleeping boy an angel before finally leaving the room. Later that night, Iron tosses and turns on the mattress, feeling a super annoying, intense itch growing on his back. Under the glowing light of a brilliant full moon, a sudden loud thud echoes through the room. Richard wakes up absolutely furious, aggressively slamming his wooden practice sword into the floor. He bitterly complains about the brutal punishment the principal forced on him earlier. Even though he apologized for skipping practice, he's been forced to train like an absolute dog for hours on end. Gripping his sword, Richard vows to get insanely strong so he can escape this place and never see the principal again. Cooling down, he cheerfully turns around, promising to fetch his precious Bam Bam some fresh fruit from downstairs. But instead of a tiny lizard, he finds a 5-year-old pink-haired boy sitting on his bed. Richard completely loses his mind, screaming at the intruder. Iron tries to calmly explain, but Richard is way too hyped up on adrenaline to listen to a single word. The young mage glares down at the adorable kid, genuinely believing this stranger just ate or kidnapped his only friend. Without hesitation, Richard summons a deadly spike of ice magic, ready to absolutely wreck the boy for touching his pet. Down the hall, the principal senses the massive spike in killing intent and panics, knowing things are about to go totally sideways. Realizing someone is about to get slaughtered, he sprints toward the room. He desperately charges up the stairs, yelling for the intruder to drop the lizard and run before it's too late. Bursting through the door, the principal freezes in confusion as Richard demands to know what all the fuss is about. Richard furiously points at Iron, screaming that a random stranger broke into his room. But the principal shuts him down immediately, pointing right back at the adorable kid and stating that he is Bam Bam. The room falls dead silent as the principal carefully observes the 5-year-old boy. He quickly concludes that this kid must be an incredibly rare beastman. Now sitting in a much nicer, fire-lit office, the principal officially registers the boy under the name Iron, noting he has no legal guardians. Iron just sits perfectly still on the couch, looking ridiculously cute but internally sweating bullets. Richard stares in utter disbelief, asking if this kid is actually his pet. The principal explains that beastmen are a rare hybrid of animal and human. He drops some heavy lore, stating that reptilian beastmen exclusively live in scorching tropical regions. Iron immediately winces, realizing his fake cover story is completely falling apart. He realizes his desperate, tearful wish from last night actually worked, allowing him to shift back into a human. But he severely panics, realizing that if he had transformed just a few seconds later, Richard's ice magic would have skewered him like a kebab. The principal leans forward and softly asks Iron if he lost his mom and dad. A terrifying, shadow-drenched image of his overprotective dad, Erno Etam, violently flashes in Iron's mind. The boy awkwardly stays quiet, and the principal gently tells him he doesn't have to force himself to talk about his trauma. The older man tightly clenches his fist, his blood boiling with rage at whoever dared to abandon such a fragile, dependent child. Cooling his anger, he asks Iron if he'd be okay staying with Richard for the time being. Iron nervously agrees, but he's completely stressed out because a massive, thick pink reptile tail is visibly poking out from behind his back. He awkwardly apologizes for the mess, admitting he tried to hide the bulky tail under his clothes but totally failed. The principal softly smiles, telling him he has absolutely nothing to be sorry for. Standing up, the principal declares he's heading straight to the capital to gather intel on beastmen, fully determined to figure out how to help his new little guest. Iron perks up when he hears the principal mention the capital. He suddenly remembers a massive piece of novel lore. The powerful Collin family mansion is located right in the heart of the city. Looking at Richard, Iron's gears start turning. He realizes this is the perfect chance to find Richard's real parents and secure the boy's happy ending. Later, Richard is intensely staring at Iron, making the boy awkwardly ask if he has something on his face. Instead, Richard proudly presents a little handmade box, asking if it looks pretty. Iron is genuinely impressed, amazed that Richard collected all this stuff himself. The purple-haired boy casually explains you can find tons of cool things just wandering around the backyard. The box is filled with cute acorns, seashells, and bright red maple leaves. But then Richard happily holds up a massive, disgusting dead centipede. Iron absolutely loses his mind, screaming and covering his face while Richard defends the bug's amazing geometry. 3 days pass since Iron miraculously transformed back into a human, and he's currently wandering the nearby forest with Richard. Iron shudders, still traumatized by the bug, while Richard promises he has other pretty things to show him. He holds up a stunning, glowing blue gemstone he found the day before. Iron stares at the jewel, totally captivated by how shiny it is. Richard teasingly asks why he likes it so much, still calling him Bam Bam. Pouting, Iron politely reminds the young mage that his actual name is Iron. Richard smirks, fully aware of that, but insists he's keeping the nickname since he's the one who saved him. Iron glares at the gem, wishing he could just call Richard by his real name without blowing his cover. Dishing out the bait, Richard asks if he should give the shiny rock to Bam Bam. But there's a catch. He playfully asks what Bam Bam is going to give him in return. Seizing the moment, Iron boldly declares that he's going to take Richard to the capital. Without missing a single beat, Richard hits him with a flat, deadpan no. He falls back into the grass, complaining that the capital completely stinks, it's way too crowded, and he already has all the candy he needs right here. Iron gets right in his face, hyping up a massive surprise that Richard couldn't even imagine. Richard raises an eyebrow, clearly skeptical about this so-called secret. He asks if it's really going to blow his mind, and Iron nods vigorously like a bobblehead. Iron mentally sweats, knowing this is a huge gamble. If Richard ends up hating his real parents or they can't reach the capital, this whole plan goes up in smoke. So to seal the deal, Iron makes a sweet promise. Since they are both orphans, they can just be each other's family if things go south. Busting out his crayons, Iron draws up a cute, foolproof master plan for tomorrow morning. While the principal is distracted introducing a new teacher, they are going to sneak right under the coachman's seat of his carriage. He maps out the exact route they need to survive to pull off the ultimate heist. Proudly holding up his crayon masterpiece, Iron happily declares they'll hitch a free ride all the way to the city. Richard bluntly calls the entire plan completely reckless, instantly crushing Iron's vibe. He points out that the terrifying principal will absolutely end them if they get caught sneaking around. Iron just flashes a bright, innocent smile, assuring him that as long as they hide well and endure the ride, they'll be totally fine. But his confidence completely shatters when Richard casually mentions the trip takes an entire week. Noticing Iron's panic, Richard asks if it's really going to be that hard. Iron mentally reviews his checklist: reunite Richard with his Duke father, return the stolen relic to Erno, and finally withdraw his billion-dollar severance pay. He desperately needs this trip to happen to secure his private island retirement. Seeing how badly the boy wants to go, Richard finally sighs. He looks at Iron's adorable drawing of them holding hands in the big city. Giving in, Richard agrees to try the crazy smuggling plan. Iron beams with joy, reminding him of their promise to stick together like family. Richard holds out his hand with a soft smile, declaring that wherever his little buddy goes, he goes too. The two boys officially lock in their master plan to conquer the capital together. The next morning, the principal's carriage is fully loaded and ready to hit the road. The older man chats with the coachman, completely unaware of the stowaways. Meanwhile, inside the tiny wooden storage compartment, Iron and Richard are squished together like a couple of sardines, with Iron mentally screaming about how ridiculously cramped it is. Iron imagined they'd have enough room to comfortably squat, but reality hits him like a truck. Squished together in the dark, he awkwardly calls out to Richard. With giant puppy dog eyes, Iron asks if it's too cramped. Richard just stares blankly, completely frozen in the tiny wooden box. Blushing from embarrassment, the young mage stubbornly claims he's totally fine, even though they're practically sitting on top of each other. Suddenly, the wooden wheels creak as the carriage starts moving. The boys bounce around inside the secret compartment, feeling every single bump in the road. But their master plan completely flops right out of the gate. Meanwhile, back at the Edam estate, Erno is suffering from his deadly monorage curse. His older sons anxiously watch as Charn uses her holy magic, wondering why it's taking way longer than 10 minutes to calm him down. Realizing it isn't working, Erno pulls his hand away from the heroine. He coldly tells her to stop wasting his time and dismisses her back to her room. Charn is left sitting alone in the massive bedroom, completely dejected. As she leaves, Kalian and Cillian rush down the hall to find their father. Erno frantically walks the halls, demanding to know if his scouts have found any trace of his missing son. His loyal guards bow their heads in shame, admitting they have zero progress. Erno grips his coat, trying to stay calm and find a logical justification for Iron running away. He violently forces his killer instincts down, reminding himself that Iron wouldn't want a father who goes on a psychotic massacre. He immediately pivots, asking for an update on the bank where he deposited Iron's billion-dollar severance pay. His subordinate nervously reports that the bank is stalling, prompting Erno to threaten their lives if they don't hand over the account records right now. Flashing back to happier times, Erno remembers Iron's bright, adorable morning greetings. Sitting alone in Iron's empty room, the deadly swordmaster reflects on how this all started. He admits that taking in a fake child was initially just born out of simple curiosity. He basically just wanted to play out a fun little skit to cure his boredom. He fully intended to toss the kid away like a broken toy once he got tired of him. But thinking of the boy's warm smile, Erno's cold heart completely melts. Iron went from being just a fake relative to a son he fiercely and genuinely cherishes. Noticing his dad completely zoning out, Kalian nervously asks if he's okay. Snapping back to reality, Erno ruthlessly orders his sons to cancel all of his schedules for the day. The boys completely panic, reminding him he has a highly important solo meeting with the Duke of Denkin. But Erno doesn't care at all, totally blowing off a massive political event set 2 months ago just to go search for his kid. He stares out the window, quietly wondering if his sincerity towards Iron was lacking. Watching the pouring rain, the terrifying patriarch just hopes his little boy is safe. Back on the road, the stowaways are caught in 4K. The principal glares down at them, totally unimpressed. He scolds them for trying to hide under the driver's seat, pointing out how lucky they are that he checked the compartment before they left. Relieved they aren't hurt, he firmly tells them they're catching a carriage straight back home from the nearest village. Iron desperately pleads with him, begging to go to the capital because he has a crucial mission. The principal completely shoots him down, warning that the capital's back alleys are packed with ruthless criminals and human traffickers. Iron doubles down, insisting he has to go, prompting the older man to ask what the big secret is so he can handle it himself. Richard steps up, trying to defend his new best friend. He tells the principal that Bam Bam promised to go with him, so they have to stick together. Realizing he has no other choice, Iron steps forward with a totally serious expression. He holds up his tiny hands, revealing the glowing blue gemstone, and declares he must deliver it to the Edam family. The principal's eyes go wide with shock at the mention of the terrifying Edam clan. Iron quickly spins a lie, claiming he's acquainted with the Duke's family and needs to hand-deliver the stone. The principal raises a highly suspicious eyebrow, questioning how a tiny stray child knows the most dangerous nobles in the empire. Sweating bullets, Iron apologizes for his reckless behavior. He dramatically insists that this stone is a vital relic, and without it, the entire Etam family is in grave danger. The principal stares at him with eyes full of absolute disbelief, clearly not buying a single word. Before Iron can explain his totally fake rumors, the coachman interrupts, shouting to ask how much further the village is. Iron desperately calls out to the principal, begging him to wait just a little longer. He promises to stay totally calm and listen to whatever the older man says. Clutching his dress tightly, Iron looks up with the ultimate puppy dog eyes. He pleads for the principal to let him tag along on the trip to the capital. The principal finally caves, sighing as he tells them to explain everything on the road and to move quickly before it gets dark. Iron completely lights up, his eyes sparkling as he happily shouts his thanks. He quickly turns to follow the older man, absolutely thrilled that his master plan is working. But Richard looks totally betrayed, his eyes hidden in dark shadows as he calls out to his pet. Iron pauses, turning back to look at the purple-haired boy. Richard stares at the ground, looking like a total horror movie villain. Iron steps closer, worried he might have pushed his new friend too far. Suddenly, Richard smirks, praising Iron for having such insanely good adaptability. He admits he had no idea his pet could weave such a wild, fake story on the spot. He points out that Iron totally used the random blue jewel he found just yesterday as a fake Edam family relic. Iron sweats bullets, internally panicking because he literally forgot where he got the rock. To quickly change the subject, Iron cheerfully suggests they head to the village to grab dinner. Internally, Iron is completely stressed out, knowing his massive lie is bound to be exposed soon. But for now, he hops into the carriage, officially starting their journey. He knows his fake story is basically a ticking time bomb waiting to absolutely wreck him. Sometime later, they finally arrive at a wildly fancy estate in the capital. Iron is mind-blown by the expensive marble floors. The principal guides them through the lavish halls, while Iron marvels at how the carpet feels soft as a cloud. They enter a grand dining room, where Richard casually starts munching on random snacks left on the table. Iron immediately scolds him for eating strange food. The principal sits the boys down to lay out the ground rules. He explains he has important business in the city and orders them to stay perfectly put in the mansion for 4 nights. Pulling out a fancy golden device, he hands it over as an emergency communication channel. Before leaving, the principal drops a bombshell. He promises to inspect Iron's magic jewel much closer when he returns. He claps his hands together, fully wrapping up his instructions. He leaves the boys to eat their dinner, unpack, and get ready for bed in the massive estate. The heavy double doors click shut, leaving them alone. Meanwhile, back at the Edam household, Kalian and Cillian literally beg their terrifying father to let them go to the capital too. Erno sits alone at his desk, silently staring at a beautiful family portrait featuring Iron, his heart absolutely aching. Cut back to the capital, Iron is organizing his inventory: snacks, comm tools, a disguise robe, and a request letter. He also checks his emergency fund, revealing a solid stack of 30,000 roasts. Iron knows reaching the Collin family mansion is going to be incredibly tight, especially since the Etam clan is definitely hunting him down for stealing their real relic. He shudders, remembering Richard's creepy promise to keep Iron by his side forever if they fail to find his parents. Staring off with determination, Iron refuses to let that happen. He realizes Richard is just a lonely kid who doesn't even know what he truly wants. Hyping himself up, Iron reminds himself that he has the mega brain of an adult, so he can totally pull this off. Wearing his cute Red Riding Hood cloak, Iron hits the city streets munching on a massive pastry. He happily chews, amazed by how sweet and delicious the bread in this world tastes. But he cries internally because he just spent a whopping 6,000 roasts on a single snack, leaving his wallet bleeding dry. He realizes the capital is insanely packed with nobles and commoners alike. Navigating past a beautiful water fountain, Iron knows he needs to calm down and stick to the plan. To avoid getting caught, he decides he needs to hail a completely private, empty carriage. Even if it completely bankrupts him, he figures he can just get off halfway and walk the rest. But suddenly, while passing a dark alley, he spots a small child huddled on the ground in a black cloak. Iron notices the boy is roughly Richard's age and looks completely starved from living on the streets. Unable to just walk away, Iron gently approaches the mysterious kid and asks if he wants some food. Being the giant softy he is, Iron holds out his precious, incredibly expensive strawberry jam scone. He awkwardly offers it, even adding that he can find a black tea flavor if the kid doesn't like strawberry. Iron gently holds out the sweet strawberry jam scone, hoping the shivering child will take it. The boy slowly looks up, revealing stunning white hair and brilliant sapphire eyes, leaving Iron completely speechless. Iron's meta-knowledge instantly kicks in, remembering how the author of Adopted Child never bothered describing minor characters. The novel's writer had a very clear focus on who mattered. They heavily hyped up Erno Edam, obsessively describing his sharp jawline, honey gold eyes, and insanely handsome features. The book only ever gave detailed descriptions for the main and secondary cast. Disposable side characters like Iron got absolutely zero attention in the looks department. So looking at this ridiculously gorgeous boy, Iron realizes he must be a major supporting actor. Iron immediately decides to stick by his side, figuring this kid can help him figure out his ultimate place in the Edam family plotline. He desperately just wants to wrap up this drama so he can retire peacefully to the orphanage. He plots to use the boy to meet up with Charn and secure his safe exit. Watching the white-haired boy happily munch on the bread, Iron internally praises Arma, the Empire's god, for blessing him with this VIP encounter. Meanwhile, back at the Edam estate, Duke Myril is aggressively doing paperwork. His assistant Kylo steps in, grimly reporting that they still have absolutely no news on Iron's whereabouts. The Duke sighs, muttering that at least Erno didn't completely blame him for the kid running away. But Kylo smirks, sharply reminding the Duke that he definitely shares the responsibility for Iron's disappearance. Duke Myril instantly gets defensive, sweating and barking that he did nothing wrong. He tries to justify his harsh actions at the trial, claiming all the Edam children grew up perfectly fine with his tough love parenting. He stubbornly insists that as head of the family, you have to strike fear first before you can talk things out. Kylo gently nods, understanding that the Duke used that brutal method to make his kids strong. But he points out the tragic flaw. Iron genuinely liked and listened to the Duke, so the sudden betrayal completely wrecked the poor kid's heart. The Duke falls dead silent, his face heavy with guilt as he realizes childhood trauma isn't easily erased. Trying to escape his own guilt, the Duke changes the subject, asking what Erno is currently up to. Kylo awkwardly reports that Erno straight up canceled his major political meeting with Marquis Fleur today. And yesterday, he blew off Duke Mari. And the day before that, he completely ghosted Duke Duncan. The Duke connects the dots, realizing his son has abandoned his noble duties for 3 days in a row just to look for Iron. Myril absolutely loses his mind, screaming that Erno is going to single-handedly bankrupt and ruin the entire family. Cut to the capital, the principal walks into a shady underground bar, surprising the bartender with a daytime visit. The principal says he's carrying a heavy burden today and tells the bartender to skip the usual small talk. He slams a heavy bag of coins onto the counter, demanding what he ordered. The bartender chuckles, noting that the principal is just as dangerously rigid as ever. He slides over a highly coveted VIP ticket to a black market basement auction. The principal tucks it away, noting that securing this ticket was a massive pain since demand is skyrocketing. The bartender questions why he's even going, knowing it's a brutal slave market, the exact kind of place the principal despises. The principal's eyes harden as he vows to buy the trapped children and sneak them safely into the orphanage. Handing him a drink, the bartender warns him not to attract any unwanted attention, bringing up the terrifying auctioneer. The boss is Manhwa, a shadowy figure whose information network is so insane it even rivals the Emperor's. The principal calmly sips his drink, promising he won't do anything reckless that would anger the guild. The bartender relaxes, trusting that the veteran mage knows exactly how to handle himself. Still, he warns the principal to prepare for the worst, as rumors say tonight's auction is packed with legendary relics and treasures. He drops a chilling detail. A super rare beastkin was recently kidnapped and brought straight to the auction block. The bartender suspects Myungwal is fiercely trying to expand his criminal empire. He mutters that nobles and guild masters are basically the same breed of cruel. Suddenly, he looks past the principal and calls out a farewell to another customer. Erno Edam steps out of a dark VIP room, having just purchased top-tier information. Erno glares silently, looking like a literal grim reaper ready to harvest souls. The entire bar freezes, and every single criminal bows deeply in sheer terror as the deadly swordmaster walks past. The bartender nervously forces a smile, begging the terrifying noble to visit again soon. An assassin offers to escort Erno home, but Erno brutally tells him to back off. The principal watches the entire scene unfold from his stool. Noticing his intense gaze, the bartender starts laughing, jokingly asking if the principal just fell in love, prompting an annoyed glare in return. Iron gently holds out the sweet pastry, nervously asking the huddled child if he'd like to eat it. The boy slowly looks up, revealing stunning white hair and brilliant sapphire eyes. Iron is completely mesmerized. His meta-knowledge instantly fires up. He remembers the author of Adopted Child never bothered describing minor side characters. The novel's writer had a very clear bias on who actually mattered. They heavily hyped up Erno Edam's sharp jawline and honey gold eyes, practically saying the gods used all their best ingredients to sculpt his handsome face. The book only ever gave detailed, beautiful descriptions for the main and secondary cast. But disposable side characters like Iron got absolutely zero attention in the looks department. So seeing a boy who looks as beautiful as a flower, Iron realizes he must be a major supporting actor. Iron's brain goes into overdrive. He figures since this kid is a key supporting character related to Charn, sticking with him is the perfect galaxy brain move. He excitedly imagines using this connection to wrap up his plotline and finally retire peacefully to the orphanage. He plots to use the boy to meet Charn and secure his safe exit. Watching the white-haired boy happily munch on the bread, Iron internally praises Arma, the Empire's god, for this absolute jackpot encounter. Meanwhile, back at the Edam estate, the sound of a quill furiously scribbling fills the room. The assistant Kylo steps up to Duke Myrle's desk, grimly reporting that they still have absolutely no news on Iron's whereabouts. The Duke sighs heavily, muttering that at least Erno hasn't completely blamed him for the kid running away. But Kylo adjusts his glasses and completely roasts the Duke, sharply reminding him that he definitely shares the blame. Duke Myrle instantly gets defensive, sweating and whining about what he did wrong. He angrily tries to justify his harsh actions at the trial, claiming all the Edam children grew up perfectly fine with his tough love parenting. He stubbornly insists that as head of the family, you have to strike fear first before you can talk things out. Kylo gently smiles, acknowledging that the Duke only did it to make the children strong. But he delivers a brutal reality check. Because Iron genuinely liked and listened to the Duke, the sudden betrayal completely wrecked the poor kid's heart. The Duke falls dead silent, his face heavy with guilt as he realizes childhood trauma isn't easily erased. Trying to dodge his own guilt, the Duke changes the subject, asking what that scoundrel Erno is currently up to. Kylo awkwardly reports that Erno straight up canceled his major political meeting with Marquis Fleur today to go work. And yesterday, he blew off Duke Mari. And the day before that, he completely ghosted Duke Duncan. The Duke connects the dots, realizing his son has abandoned his noble duties for 3 days in a row. Myrle absolutely loses his mind, screaming Erno's name and accusing his son of trying to bankrupt the entire family. Cut to the capital, a shady bartender welcomes a familiar face into his underground tavern. The principal walks in, stating he's carrying a heavy burden today and telling the bartender to skip the small talk. The bartender slides over a small pouch the principal ordered, noting how cold the veteran mage is acting. He chuckles, saying the principal's rigid personality hasn't changed one bit. He hands over a shiny golden VIP ticket to a highly exclusive basement auction. The principal tucks it away, complaining that securing the ticket was a massive pain since demand is skyrocketing. The bartender questions why he's even going, knowing it's a brutal slave market, the exact kind of scum the principal hates the most. The principal's eyes harden as he vows to buy the trapped children and sneak them safely into his orphanage. Pouring a drink, the bartender warns him not to attract attention, bringing up the terrifying auctioneer. He drops the name Myungwal, a shadowy boss whose information network is so insane it even rivals the Emperor's. The principal calmly sips his drink, promising he won't do anything reckless that would anger the guild right now. The bartender relaxes, trusting that the veteran mage knows exactly how to handle himself. Still, he warns the principal to prepare for the worst, as rumors say tonight's auction is packed with legendary relics and treasures. He drops a chilling detail. A super rare beastkin was recently kidnapped and brought straight to the auction block. The bartender suspect's Myungwal is fiercely trying to expand his criminal empire. He mutters that nobles and guild masters are equally cruel. Suddenly, he looks past the principal and calls out a farewell to another customer. Erno Etam steps out of a dark VIP room, having just purchased top-tier information on the black market. Erno glares silently, looking like a literal grim reaper ready to harvest souls. The entire bar freezes, and every single criminal bows deeply in sheer terror as the deadly swordmaster walks past. Erno glances back with dead eyes as the bartender nervously tells him to come again. An assassin offers to escort Erno home, but Erno brutally tells him to back off. The principal watches the entire scene unfold from his stool. Noticing his intense gaze, the bartender starts laughing, jokingly asking if the principal just fell in love, prompting an annoyed glare in return. A shattering glass breaks the silence as a desperate voice screams about broken promises. The mysterious woman cries out, begging to know why she was abandoned. A purple-haired man stands in the shadows, his expression absolutely unhinged as he whispers that she belongs to him. The dark flashback abruptly shifts to a wholesome, sunlit memory of a sleeping newborn baby. Duke Michael Collin and his beautiful blonde wife sit peacefully by the crib, trying to pick out a name for their child. The Duke smiles warmly, suggesting the name Richard in hopes he grows up to be a healthy, righteous man. The camera pans over the adorable, sleeping baby. His mother smiles sweetly, agreeing that it's a perfect fit. She whispers a heartfelt promise to raise him as the happiest kid in the world. The new parents gaze lovingly at their son, wishing him a life full of love. But the warm memory shatters as a harsh voice accuses the Duke of pushing their clan to absolute ruin. The baby cries out in his cradle as the unseen figure mocks the idea of him ever being happy. The scene cuts to a snowy dock where two shady figures plot against the villainous archmage's son, planning to seal his magic. The hooded figure makes it clear this isn't a simple shakedown, it's pure revenge. Snapping back to the present, Iron stands inside a lavish, sunlit room in the capital. An armed guard escorts him, warning him to keep his story short since Duke Colin is incredibly busy. The guard glares at Iron, warning him that the Duke absolutely despises liars. Iron steps forward and comes face to face with Duke Michael Colin, who sits majestically at his desk. Iron stares in awe at the powerful man. He notes that the Duke looks exactly like his character description in the original novel. Iron is completely mesmerized, thinking the man looks like a literal ice spirit. But the room falls dead silent, and the Duke just waits for the little boy to speak up. The Duke demands to know everything about Iron's supposed friend, appearance, characteristics, and his name. Iron gulps, realizing the Duke's cold, piercing gaze looks like he's trying to figure out a way to kill a fraud. Sweating bullets, Iron hesitates, knowing one wrong word will instantly turn him into a corpse. He frantically scans the Duke's appearance, noting his fading purple hair and scrambles his brain for a detail. Iron knows he needs undeniable proof right this second. He racks his memory for the one defining feature that screams Richard. Suddenly, a light bulb goes off. He blurts out that his friend wears a long, white, square earring on his right ear. The Duke immediately pulls out that exact piece of jewelry, and Iron excitedly confirms it, adding that Richard's ice magic sometimes leaves frost. The Duke instantly loses his cool, slamming his hands on the desk and demanding to see his son. He tries to rush out the door, saying he'll handle any personal issues immediately. Iron quickly pumps the brakes, explaining that Richard has no idea he snuck out to do this. Putting on his best innocent smile, Iron promises to take full responsibility and bring Richard here tomorrow. Calming down slightly, the Duke suspiciously asks how Iron knew they were related in the first place. Iron smoothly lies, claiming he saw the missing posters plastered all over the capital. He adds that the Duke and Richard look basically identical, which completely gave it away. Inwardly, Iron smirks, remembering how the rumors spread in the original plotline. He knows his meta-knowledge is totally saving his life right now. Beaming, Iron tells the terrifying Duke to trust him for the sake of their grand reunion. The Duke finally yields, agreeing to send a carriage to whatever address Iron provides. Iron declines a ride home, cheerfully saying his friend is waiting to pick him up. Outside the estate, Iron is greeted by the starving white-haired boy he fed earlier. The kid happily trots over like a loyal puppy, eagerly calling Iron his master. As Iron reaches into his cloak, his prized blue relic fragment slips out and hits the ground with a clink. He panics for a second, but the white-haired boy quickly scoops it up. Iron breathes a massive sigh of relief, thanking the boy for saving the highly important item. But the boy just smiles and casually drops a massive bombshell. He mentions what a crazy coincidence it is that they have the exact same item. Opening his hands, the boy reveals two identical glowing blue shards, leaving Iron completely stunned. Iron stares at the glowing blue shards in the boy's hand, wondering if they are exactly the same as the one he has. His meta-knowledge instantly kicks in, recalling that there are only 7 of these fragments in existence. He remembers that his terrifying adoptive dad, Erno, holds 3, Richard has 1, and the location of another is totally unknown. A massive lore drop hits Iron as he remembers the Fragment of Balance, a legendary dragon's relic. Originally called the Stone of Balance, the first head of the Etam clan shattered it with a black dragon's permission to distribute its power to those in need. Iron does the mental math, realizing that if this random street kid has 2 fragments, the puzzle is basically solved. With a bright, innocent smile, the white-haired kid casually offers to just give his priceless fragments to Iron. He tilts his head, asking Iron what he thinks of the deal. Sweating slightly, Iron nervously brushes it off, telling the kid to just keep them since they probably only look similar. Inwardly, Iron is absolutely panicking, realizing there's a massive chance this starving street urchin is actually a candidate for the Grand Priest position. He mentally pictures the real future Grand Priest, currently suffering in some brutal, jungle-like temple while this kid just wanders the streets. Totally ignoring Iron's internal crisis, the boy stares with wide puppy dog eyes and begs to be his useful dog. Iron feels a massive wave of guilt, thinking this kid is way too fragile as the boy literally starts crying over feeling useless. Knowing the kid has nowhere else to go, Iron sighs and decides to bring him back to his temporary base. The kid gets completely hyped, cheering about being a loyal dog, while Iron just gives up on trying to correct him. Arriving back at the lavish estate, Iron tells the boy to wait quietly in the hall while he checks on his friend. The boy happily obeys, kneeling on the floor like a perfectly trained puppy. Iron sneaks into the dark, quiet room, softly calling out for Richard. He pushes the door open, casually apologizing for dipping out without saying anything. Suddenly, Iron steps on a piece of shattered glass next to a crushed rose and gasps in shock. Richard is standing in the middle of a completely trashed room, his hair casting a dark shadow over his eyes like a literal horror movie villain. Completely ignoring the absolute chaos around him, Iron cheerfully announces that he found Richard's family. He excitedly explains that he met Richard's dad today and that they are sending a carriage tomorrow, noting how crazy it is that they look totally identical. Iron beams, suggesting they go together tomorrow to finally reunite him with his parents. He gently grabs Richard's hand, expecting his friend to be thrilled. But Richard just stares back blankly, coldly asking why he has to go to a place like that. A quick flashback shows the boys hooking pinky fingers, making a sacred promise to be a real family. They had promised to always be there for each other no matter what. Snapping back to the present, Richard's grip tightens violently. Tears stream down his face as he screams, desperately asking why Iron is abandoning him too. Richard completely breaks down, yelling that he was always sincere and begging to know why Iron lied to him. Iron briefly reflects on his past life, remembering how people just throw around simple, meaningless words when they feel lonely. But he realizes Richard isn't just some random side character. He has a real place to return to, making those empty promises completely useless. Richard drops to his knees in the middle of the room, totally crushed by the betrayal. Iron kneels down next to him, softly promising that he isn't lying and he definitely isn't abandoning him. He leans in close, warmly telling Richard that he really likes him. But then he drops the harsh truth. Compared to him, Richard's real family loves him infinitely more. Richard looks up, completely stunned by the mention of his parents. Iron looks him dead in the eye and firmly states that his parents never abandoned him. He pulls out the massive 1 billion bounty poster with Richard's baby face on it, explaining that they simply lost him. Iron reveals that for the past 10 years, his parents have been frantically searching every single day, just hoping he was alive. Looking at the adorable baby portrait, Iron reassures Richard that they are definitely still family. He confidently promises that when tomorrow comes, they'll go find Richard's other family together. Richard is left completely speechless, tears welling up in his eyes. Blushing slightly, Richard softly asks if Iron will please stay by his side and come with him. The scene shifts to a jar of scattered candies, perfectly symbolizing the sweet dream Iron just handed him. A bright, magical light fills the room as Richard finally accepts this massive ray of hope. Meanwhile, back at the Duke's office, a high-tier magical artifact glows on the desk. An investigator reports that the magical item confirmed Iron's story. There is a massive chance the boy he described is actually young Master Richard. The investigator asks if they should raid the estate immediately, but the Duke, holding a family portrait, decides to keep his promise to Iron and just monitor them for now. Meanwhile, at the Duke's estate, the usually icy ruler is currently completely silent, staring down at a small baby portrait. Tears well up in his eyes as the heavy realization finally hits him. His son is actually alive. Back at the hideout, Iron looks softly at his friend. Richard nervously asks if they are still a family, and Iron answers without a second of hesitation. He warmly promises that no matter what anyone says or what happens, they will always be family. Richard is totally overwhelmed by the reassurance, covering his face as tears stream down his cheeks. But his anxiety quickly spikes again. He nervously asks if Iron will come live with him at the Duke's estate once he goes back. Iron rubs the back of his head, hesitantly admitting that he can't because he has his own important business to take care of. Richard completely panics, desperately asking if that business is somehow more important than his own family. He lunges forward, frantically begging Iron not to leave, suggesting they just pretend to be siblings so they can stay together forever. With tears in his eyes, Richard asks if he's being abandoned. Iron immediately denies it, promising to visit him all the time. But Richard refuses to listen, screaming that he literally cannot live without him. But right at that dramatic climax, the door clicks open. The white-haired street kid peeks his head in, apologizing for the intrusion but claiming he got worried over the shouting. The kid freezes, staring blankly as Richard aggressively pins Iron to the floor in the middle of the trashed room. There is a moment of dead silence before Richard glares at the door, demanding to know who this random kid is. Instantly assuming the worst, the white-haired kid rushes into the room, screaming in absolute panic for his master. He grabs Iron's arm to pull him away, while Iron wildly waves his hands, trying to explain they were just having a deep conversation. The kid totally ignores him, stating that Iron was clearly being threatened and promises to take care of Richard later. But Richard isn't having it. He snatches Iron's other arm, pulling back with a deadly glare, sparking a literal tug-of-war over Iron like he's a highly coveted plushie. The kid refuses to let go, demanding to know who Richard thinks he is. Richard angrily snaps back, pointing out that he's the one who barged into their room. The kid argues that he heard Richard throwing things at his master, though Iron frantically tries to explain that the room was already destroyed before he even walked in. Ignoring the logic, the kid insists they leave because he can't stand Richard's presence, while Richard furiously tells him to unhand Iron immediately. The kid's eyes go dark as he contemplates just taking Richard out right here and now. Sensing the bloodlust, Richard gets totally fired up, loudly challenging the kid to a straight-up brawl. But before a magical turf war can break out, Iron suddenly face-splints into the floor like a sack of potatoes, groaning that he's starving. Both boys instantly drop the tough guy act and scream in pure panic. The kid shakes Iron, begging his master to wake up, while Richard frantically promises to go find food. A little while later, the room is completely spotless. The white-haired kid looks at the billion-gold bounty poster, finally putting two and two together. He casually mentions to a now-recovered Iron that he figured out Richard is the Duke's son and was planning to escort him there tomorrow. Iron is a bit surprised and asks how the kid managed to figure out Richard's magical capabilities. He points out that Richard never actually used any magic in front of him. The kid just smiles cheerfully, explaining that he could just feel the distinct energy of an archmage radiating from him. He then casually offers to clean Iron's dirty robe, but this triggers a massive realization in Iron's head. Iron stares at him suspiciously, his mental gears spinning at full speed. He remembers the exact lore from the novel regarding the future Grand Priest's core personality traits. One of his defining characteristics is an absolute, deeply ingrained hatred for shape-shifting beastkin. Because the temple heavily preaches human supremacy, the future Grand Priest perceives all beastkin as filthy and completely inferior. Iron purposefully let the kid follow him, assuming that once the kid realized he was a beastkin, he would be totally disgusted and leave on his own. Iron watches him intently, waiting for the disgust to finally kick in. He fully expects the kid to follow the original storyline's racist tendencies. But instead, the kid is just totally geeking out over the high-quality, magic-blocking fabric of the robe. Utterly confused, Iron actively wiggles his massive pink lizard tail right in the open, asking if the kid can even see it. The boy just smiles and says he noticed it earlier. Iron asks if it's disturbing, but the kid casually shrugs it off, saying he was a bit surprised since he's never seen a shapeshifter, but he honestly doesn't care. Completely thrown off the rails, Iron asks the kid what his name is. The boy gives a warm, bright smile and asks Iron to call him Lucilian. Iron's brain practically short-circuits. He completely confirms it, this kid is the future Grand Priest, but he's currently not racist at all. Lucilian continues, saying he knows it's weird that he followed him, but he has a very important reason for serving him. Blushing slightly, he confesses that it felt like absolute fate when Iron reached out and saved his life. He steps closer to express his devotion, but before he can finish, a waiter bursts into the room with a massive, glorious dinner cart. Iron instantly forgets all plot relevance and aggressively zeroes in on the food. Iron completely stuffs his face with food while Richard happily declares that since he ate his meal, They are officially moving in together tomorrow. Iron quietly hushes him, then nervously double-checks with his friend just to be sure about their escape plan. The next day, the boys find themselves staring at a ridiculously lavish golden carriage. Richard wonders aloud why it's so grand just as an older gentleman approaches, politely greeting Sir Richard Colin. The man introduces himself as Bilter, a servant of the Colin family, and bows respectfully. He announces that the Duke is eagerly waiting for them. Bilter gestures to the ultra-luxurious ride, completely rolling out the red carpet for the boys. As they climb in, the local townspeople whisper in absolute shock, wondering why a bunch of raggedy kids are getting the VIP royal treatment. Inside the carriage, Richard stares out the window, completely lost in his thoughts. Iron leans over, noticing his friend's silence, and asks if he's doing okay. Richard nervously admits that his stomach is doing literal backflips. Suddenly, Lucilian, who is casually kneeling on the carriage floor, chimes in that a master's dog must always stay by their side. Richard glares at the white-haired boy with pure disgust, asking if he's a literal dog shapeshifter or just insane. Iron awkwardly plays peacekeeper, explaining that Lucilian had nowhere else to go, so they are just stuck together for now. Richard bluntly states that he hates him, and Lucilian instantly fires back, telling Richard to get off his master's carriage. The two boys immediately start bickering, with Lucilian calling Richard a fraud, until Iron threatens to smack them both if they don't chill out. The scenic carriage ride smoothly transitions through the city. They finally arrive at the massive Colin Manor, where a literal army of maids and butlers is lined up to welcome them. The head maid greets the boys warmly, noting that they've come a very long way. She gestures down the grand hallway, offering to lead them inside. They arrive in front of a pair of massive double doors where Duke Colin is waiting. Staring at the imposing entrance, Richard completely freezes up, his anxiety skyrocketing. Iron reaches out and gently takes his hand, warmly telling him not to be so tense. With a massive, reassuring smile, Iron promises that everyone inside already loves him. A maid respectfully announces their arrival and opens the doors. Iron walks in first, flanked by Richard and Lucilian with their hoods up like a tiny squad of rogues. As they step into the light, they lower their hoods to greet the Duke. The ice-cold Duke instantly drops his terrifying facade, rushing forward to pull Richard into a desperate, emotional hug. Tears stream down the Duke's face as he cries, thanking the heavens that his son grew up well. He pulls back, looking at Richard with absolute adoration, and tells him how much he truly loves him. Wiping his tears, the Duke asks Richard to sit down so he can finally explain everything. Taking the hint, Iron awkwardly shuffles backward, telling everyone he'll just wait in the other room to give them some space. But Richard instantly goes into full panic mode, aggressively grabbing Iron's clothes and screaming that they can't be apart. He begs Iron not to go, threatening to just follow him out of the room if he leaves. Hearing this, the Duke slowly turns his head and shoots Iron a terrifying demonic death glare that clearly screams, "If you make my son cry, you are a dead man." Sweating buckets, Iron instantly caves, awkwardly laughing and promising to stay right beside them. The Duke immediately switches back to a super wholesome, smiling dad, cheerfully agreeing that they should all stick together. He warmly invites Iron to sit down, promising to have the staff bring out some tea, while Iron mentally questions the man's sanity. A gorgeous spread of fancy tea and expensive desserts is laid out on the table. The Duke sits back, thanking Iron for coming, and solemnly begins to explain how they lost Richard all those years ago. He speaks about the sheer agony of living without his precious son. But then his fist clenches violently as he shifts the topic to the people responsible. With a terrifyingly calm smile, the Duke casually mentions that they finally tracked down the very last member of the pirate crew who took him. Sitting comfortably on his sofa, he begins to describe exactly what he did to the criminal. The imagery gets violently graphic as the Duke explains how he used his ice magic to freeze the man solid, before brutally shattering him into a million pieces. He flashes a completely unhinged smile, casually bragging that by the time he was done, the pirate wasn't even in a recognizable human form. Iron sits there utterly traumatized, thinking the Duke absolutely did not need to describe a literal Mortal Kombat fatality in front of his 8-year-old kid. He looks over at Richard, fully expecting the boy to be scarred for life, but Richard is actually crying tears of joy. Richard tells his dad that he's deeply moved by the effort, casually adding that the torture sounds amazing and actually asks to watch it live next time. Iron realizes this entire family is completely unhinged. The Duke gives Richard a surprisingly warm smile, declaring that they must witness the pirates' punishment together. Richard beams, finally basking in the gentle warmth of his real father. Right on cue, a maid steps in to announce that dinner is finally served. The Duke invites the kids to eat their fill, and Iron instantly perks up, asking if they have chocolate. But before Iron can dive into the feast, the Duke asks to speak with him in private. Richard immediately throws a massive tantrum, fiercely grabbing Iron and screaming that his best friend isn't going anywhere. The Duke smoothly diffuses the situation, calmly telling Richard to just enjoy the food while they have a quick chat. Richard reluctantly lets go, but dramatically warns his dad that Bam Bam will literally faint if he misses a meal. As soon as they are alone, the Duke's warm dad persona vanishes. His eyes turn sharp and calculating, making Iron gulp as he realizes the real negotiations are starting. The Duke gets straight to business, asking exactly where Iron first met Richard. Iron answers that it was at the orphanage. Hearing this, the Duke rubs his temples and lets out a heavy sigh, realizing just how far his son had been. He explains that Archmage kids normally terrify regular children with their intense aura. The Duke knows Richard must have had a brutal time with no one to protect him. But he quickly notes how incredibly lucky Richard was to have a great teacher looking out for him. The Duke completely praises the headmaster, Alvian, for stepping up and providing the love and care his son desperately needed. He acknowledges that the headmaster basically played the role of a father. Feeling a massive wave of relief, the Duke mentions that he should probably summon the headmaster here to properly reward him. Iron awkwardly nods along, sweating bullets since his meta-knowledge reminds him that he literally saved that exact headmaster's life with a single lie back at the academy. The Duke then turns his intense gaze back to Iron, bringing up the massive bounty reward for finding his son. With absolute confidence, the Duke tells the little boy he will give him literally anything he wants. Iron's eyes light up as he thinks for a second, simply asking for a home. He excitedly pictures a cozy, one-story wooden house in the capital, perfectly situated right next to the bank and his grandpa's estate. The Duke pauses, placing his teacup down as he notes there's a slight issue with that request. He states that a simple house is way too small of a reward, especially for a shapeshifter. Iron completely freezes in panic. The Duke smirks, revealing that even though Iron hid his tail perfectly, an archmage can literally feel the magic radiating off of him. The Duke drops a harsh reality check. In this empire, shapeshifters legally cannot own property in the capital. He warns Iron that if he tries to live alone, no one will protect him from the harsh laws. To survive, a beastkin must either belong to a recognized clan or serve under a master. Otherwise, they are treated like the absolute bottom of society. Iron mentally panics, realizing he doesn't have a master, meaning his only legal option is to go back to his fake Komodo dragon clan. The Duke casually asks what exactly he is, and Iron quickly lies, claiming he's just a lizard. The Duke squints, easily noticing that Iron's bright pink hair and eyes definitely don't match typical reptile beastkin. But he smoothly drops the subject, telling Iron to just forget about going back to his clan. Instead, the Duke leans forward with a completely game-changing offer. He slides a document across the table and asks Iron if he wants to become Richard's official sibling. Iron is absolutely shell-shocked as the Duke promises him a lifetime of food, clothing, education, and top-tier protection. The Duke admits he's willing to bypass the Empire's strict laws, making a massive exception just for him. Meanwhile, cut to a completely different part of town, where a frustrated man stares at a messy map and a flyer for a fancy cake. He violently complains about the confusing roads, completely lost in the maze-like village. He wanders the cobblestone streets, raging at the terrible directions while locals watch him stumble around. Absolutely nothing is going his way, and he curses the terrible weather for ruining his mission. But he refuses to give up, fully determined to secure this legendary cake for Lady Lillian's upcoming birthday. He hypes himself up, vowing to get this dessert for her even if it literally kills him. Looking like a totally unhinged anime protagonist, he swears to complete the mission on his own. He dramatically promises to place the gift right into Lady Lillian's hands. He smirks into the distance, completely fired up over a pastry run. Back at the Collin Manor, a maid named Lisa interrupts the Duke's meeting, bringing the contact info for the orphanage headmaster. She hands over the letter, confirming the orphanage kids have arrived safely in the capital. The Duke instructs her to prepare a formal invitation for the headmaster later. With that handled, the Duke turns his piercing purple eyes back to Iron, waiting for an answer to his massive adoption offer. Completely overwhelmed by the sudden plot twist, Iron awkwardly thanks the Duke for the generosity but begs for some time to think about it. Duke Collin stares at Iron, recalling the first time they met and noticing how the kid's eyes held absolutely zero expectations. The Duke firmly tells Iron that a golden opportunity like this will never come around again. He leans in closer, asking if Iron seriously wants to go back to that rundown orphanage. Iron gently replies that the orphanage is deeply meaningful to him, pointing out that without it, he never would have met Richard in the first place. The Duke silently observes the boy, realizing that beneath his bright, innocent smile. Iron hides a fierce determination and a thought process way beyond a normal 5-year-old. Comparing Iron to his own son, the Duke deduces that as a rare mutant beastkin, the boy was likely discarded by his biological family at birth. He knows exactly how society works. Mutant beastkin are either worshipped as angels or brutally hunted as demons. He assumes Iron has already been through absolute hell. With his mind completely made up, the Duke grabs a pen, firmly declaring he will legally adopt Iron into the Collin family. He promises that even though their family isn't perfect, Iron will grow up to be a great kid. An official adoption application is drawn up, cementing Iron's crazy new status. Later that night, Iron completely collapses onto a massive, cloud-like bed, totally drained. He groans about the insane day he just had, going straight from the carriage to an intense interview and barely catching a break to eat. To make matters worse, Richard and Lucilian are literally still barking at each other in the middle of his room. Iron tunes them out, sighing in relief as he realizes his main mission is basically wrapped up. All that's left is for Lucilian to return to the temple, and for Iron to finally bag his massive severance pay from the bank and make a clean getaway. He also needs to figure out a way to safely return the legendary fragments of balance. Knowing it's way too risky to deliver them himself without getting tossed in jail as a thief, he decides he needs to find a proxy. Wanting to clear his name of the false charges back home, he decides to sneak out for a quick walk to buy some letter paper. But the beef in the room is reaching critical mass. Richard screams at Lucilian to stop talking nonsense, while the white-haired boy calmly insists he's just spitting facts. Richard fiercely yells that Iron already said Lucilian is definitely not moving in with them. Getting completely fired up, Richard calls him a fool and loudly declares he will always stay by Bam Bam's side. Then Richard drops an absolute nuke, screaming that he and Bam Bam are going to get married. Iron, who is literally halfway out the door, completely short-circuits marriage. Richard doubles down, clenching his fists and fiercely stating they will be a real married couple and a true family. He turns to Iron with crazy eyes, demanding he confirm their sacred promise. Iron totally dodges the psycho question, clutching his head and declaring he's going for a walk before his brain explodes. Richard whines that more food is coming, but Lucilian instantly simps for Iron, telling Richard to shut up because the master has spoken. Lucilian tries to tag along like a loyal puppy, but Iron swiftly slams the door in both their faces, demanding some alone time. Out in the cool evening air, Iron breathes a massive sigh of relief, worried he's going to lose his mind with the plot going this far off the rails. He marches down the estate steps, giving himself a quick pep talk to stay focused. He starts wondering about the original heroine and the male leads, casually pondering if they'll form a messy reverse harem. Pulling his hood up, he grips his money bag and heads into town to run his errands. Suddenly, a strange voice echoes in his mind, warning him that his magical power is being blocked. Iron is totally clueless about his own magic. The voice explains that all beasts can go through a growth period, and leaving his raw power unchecked is incredibly dangerous. Remembering the Duke mentioning his growth period, Iron wonders if unlocking his magic is his ultimate escape ticket. Completely distracted, he bumps into a random guy on the street dropping his stuff. The man picks it up, offering to help carry it. Iron quickly snatches it back, apologizing and rushing off down the stairs. But as he walks away, Iron realizes the guy looked absolutely terrible, pale, shaking, and drenched in a cold sweat. Realizing the sun is setting fast, he shakes off the weird encounter and picks up his pace. He jogs through the darkening streets of the capital, trying to beat the nightfall. Meanwhile, a sinister figure smirks in the shadows, noticing that despite Iron's magic-blocking robe, his raw beast aura is literally leaking everywhere. The pale guy from the street kneels before the figure, reporting that the boy's energy is completely wild and unlike any normal beast he's ever felt. The mysterious boss inspects a glowing magical thread, noting that even the kid's hair color is incredibly special. The camera cuts to two ominous, cloaked figures standing on a rooftop, declaring that today is finally the day. Back at the academy, the headmaster holds a letter Iron just sent. He remembers Iron as just an ordinary, innocent 5-year-old kid. But looking at the incredibly advanced, flawless grammar in the letter, the headmaster realizes the boy is hiding a massive secret. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the headmaster pulls up to a heavily guarded location wearing a wolf mask, feeling like the whole setup is insanely suspicious. But with lives on the line, he pushes his doubts aside and steps out of the carriage. He stands before a massive, blindingly luxurious estate, fully prepared to march right into the tiger's den. This isn't just any mansion, it's the Bright Moon Guild's underground black market. It's a vile place where everything from stolen jewelry to actual humans and beastkin are sold to the highest bidder. The operation is so insanely massive that even the Emperor is forced to turn a blind eye to it. Headmaster Alvian's true mission is to buy kidnapped children and safely rehome them at his orphanage. He had everything planned down to the letter, but a major unexpected variable threw a wrench in the gears. That variable was Iron and Richard sneaking off, but now that Duke Cullen has his son back, Alvian can finally focus solely on the auction. Deep in the holding cells, a sleazy auctioneer shows Alvian a brand new product, hyping up a rare, brightly colored lizard beastkin. He pitches the kid as a high-quality investment that just arrived. The employee smirks, casually suggesting the buyer could use him as a literal living decoration. The masked guard boasts that it's the absolute best catch of the day, perfect for a fancy pet. But when Alvian looks into the cage, he completely freezes, accidentally crushing the heavy wooden tally in his hand into absolute sawdust. The guard freaks out at Alvian's monstrous grip strength, quickly scrambling to fetch a new tag. The second the guard runs off, Alvian whips around and rushes to the bars. He pulls off his mask, revealing his true face to a totally bewildered Iron. Alvian frantically checks if Iron is hurt, completely mind-blown that one of his own students ended up behind bars. Serious mode activated, Alvian whispers a strict warning. Iron has to stay perfectly still and do absolutely nothing so the rescue operation doesn't blow up in their faces. Suddenly, another guard calls out, forcing Alvian to slap his mask back on and step away. The employee returns, offering special deals, but Alvian plays it cool, asking to be taken to the main holding area with the rest of the kids. As Alvian gets escorted deeper into the dungeon, he throws one last worried glance over his shoulder at his student. Left alone in the cold cell, Iron is completely flabbergasted, trying to process how the heck he even got here. He realizes he literally just got kidnapped out of nowhere. He sits on the floor, absolutely dumbfounded by the sheer absurdity of the situation. He pieces his memory together, recalling he was just running home from the stationery store in the dark. One second he was out for a quick stroll, and the next he was waking up in a literal human trafficking ring. But then his meta-knowledge kicks in. He remembers this exact auction house is a major plot point where the original heroine, Sharn, meets the prince. Iron realizes that means the main characters are probably locked up in this exact same dungeon. Deciding to follow Alvian's advice, Iron chooses to just chill, but the peace is violently shattered by a kid screaming bloody murder next door. A guard brutally kicks a blonde boy into a cell, telling him to shut his mouth and say his prayers before he gets sold. The blonde kid absolutely snaps, calling the guards cowardly scum and threatening them with the literal guillotine. He falls back, coughing violently, but still glares daggers at the retreating men. Noticing Iron staring, the blonde brat fiercely snaps at him, demanding to know what he's looking at and calling him a peasant. Iron deadpans at the kid, thinking it's wild that this boy is demanding royal manners while locked in a literal dungeon. The arrogant boy completely acts like he owns the place, bragging that the royal guards are already on their way to rescue him. But his tough guy act fades instantly as a harsh shiver runs down his spine, leaving him desperate for some warmth. Seeing the kid freeze, Iron just quietly scoots over and tosses his thick cloak over the boy's shoulders. Instead of saying thanks, the blonde brat freaks out like a cornered cat, screaming at Iron not to touch him. Iron just looks at him like he's an idiot, bluntly stating that he's going to catch a cold. The boy dramatically shoves him away, screaming that his body is precious and nobody has permission to touch him. The kid starts coughing violently again, shouting that he already has someone and absolutely refuses Iron's pity. Iron sweat drops at the sheer arrogance, watching the kid hack up a lung while still trying to act superior. But then Iron notices two highly specific details: a mole under the boy's left eye and blood-red irises. Suddenly, the boy coughs into his hand, revealing a horrifying splatter of dark red blood. Iron's heart drops as the lore clicks into place. He remembers the original heroine giving this exact boy a pep talk about survival and miracles. This isn't just some random snobby kid. It's the doomed imperial prince Inashtian Orid who suffers from a terminal illness. A lore flashback speeds up, showing the imperial guards absolutely raiding the auction house and successfully rescuing the prince alongside Alvian. The scene sharply cuts to the imperial palace sometime later, where a much sicker prince lays bedridden, violently coughing. His aides watch over him with grim expressions, noting that ever since the kidnapping, his illness has skyrocketed, leaving them terrified he won't even survive the winter. The headmaster reflects on the grim reality. The prince's terminal illness is actually the devastating plague. It was essentially a bioweapon created by anti-aristocratic forces, spread when a commoner soldier purposely infected His Highness. In response, the emperor went completely scorched earth, ordering the execution of every traitor and their entire bloodline. Innocent villagers begged for their lives, claiming it was a misunderstanding, but the soldiers just brutally smacked them down. Lines of guiltless people were dragged away in chains as their festivals burned to the ground. The headmaster remembers the bitter anger of the commoners who were pushed past their breaking point. With the country in absolute chaos, an ignorant emperor and greedy soldiers dragging innocents away, Alvian realizes he can't sit back anymore. The original heroine, Sharn, stands proudly with a flag symbolizing the upcoming rebellion. Snapping out of his deep thoughts, Iron sits in his cell, absolutely mind-blown by the mess he's in. He pieces it all together: the auction house, the sick prince, the plague. Between the childcare drama, the sudden political war, and the plague, Iron realizes the novel is fully nosediving into a bad ending. In the original plot, the prince is already infected and doomed to die. Iron questions if he should just let the kid perish, but quickly decides that's totally off the table. Even though the prince is an absolute brat, Iron refuses to watch a child suffer. Plus, if the political conflict blows up, it ruins Iron's dream of just kicking back and watching the heroine grow up in peace. Fired up, Iron vows to save the crown prince at all costs. Meanwhile, Enosh just glares right back at him. The arrogant prince scoffs, calling Iron a peasant and claiming nothing he does will matter. Enosh throws out a weird insult, calling Iron a piece of dough, and brags that his own dream girl is beautiful, elegant, and smart. Blushing furiously, Enosh coughs and confesses he already has someone he likes. Iron's mind instantly flashes to Sharn, the original female lead who helped him endure his hellish past life. Iron points excitedly, realizing the prince is totally crushing on the heroine. Enosh nods proudly and Iron just deadpans, silently respecting the boy's hopeless romantic hustle. Suddenly, Enosh throws his arms wide open, demanding a hug as an apology for his rude behavior. But Iron instantly sees right through the act. The prince is just shivering like a hairless chihuahua in the freezing dungeon. Taking pity on the sick kid, Iron scoots over and shares his body heat, figuring they'll never see each other again anyway. But out of nowhere, a guard bursts in screaming and brutally kicks Enosh, sending Iron tumbling away. Iron groans, rubbing his head as Enosh looks over in shock. Iron realizes he dropped his precious piece of paper. Enosh notices he's trying to write a letter, and Iron confirms he has some critical info to jot down. The snobby prince immediately roasts the cheap stationery, calling it literal fire starter. Iron just sighs, ignoring the sass. Enosh slumps against the cold wall, realizing his condition is rapidly deteriorating with every single breath. Grabbing a pencil, the prince prepares to write what might be his final goodbye. Meanwhile, back at the Etam estate, it is pure pandemonium. Erno Etam is practically tearing the gates down looking for Iron. Richard is bawling his eyes out, while Erno fiercely promises he'll track his missing son down. The terrifying Duke is literally losing his mind with worry, wondering where on earth Iron vanished to. Back in the cell, Iron holds up the glowing blue gem, confirming it's the real fragment of balance. He carefully slips the priceless relic into an envelope. His master plan is to hide it until Alvian rescues him, then mail it straight to his overpowered dad. But Iron knows that sending this letter will completely derail the original novel's timeline. Because on that paper, he writes down the exact formula for the plague cure. In the original story, a genius named Callan discovered the plague was spread by microscopic bugs. The cure is essentially just a high-tier insect repellent, something a modern person would easily figure out. But in this fantasy era, a medicine like this is basically magic. When Callan finally invented it, the Etam family mass-produced it for free, single-handedly saving the entire empire. Iron knows the rebellion is already brewing, and the nation is teetering on the edge of destruction. He hesitates, clutching his letter and wondering if he really has the right to play God with the timeline. Suddenly, Enosh shoves a piece of paper in Iron's face, proudly declaring it's a love letter and demanding he read it. Iron gives him a hilariously unamused death glare, prompting Enosh to yell that the letter is for his fiancée, not him. Totally mistaking Iron for a girl, the prince arrogantly asks him to rate how touching the letter is from a female perspective. Iron starts reading, only to find the very first line is Enosh aggressively flexing about being the most handsome and charismatic man alive. Enosh proudly reads his love letter out loud, starting with a creepy line about watching his crush from behind, before arrogantly asking if Iron even understands his pretty words. Iron just stares at him like he's lost his mind, bluntly stating that literally everything about the letter is a massive red flag. He absolutely nukes the prince's ego, telling him he sounds exactly like a stalker. Enosh slumps to the floor in pure defeat, whining that he put so much thought into those terrible lines. Iron glances at the name Lillian on the envelope, sensing a weird wave of déjà vu. He feels a strange mental block, like someone is purposely messing with his memories, but shakes it off to ask Enosh if that's really all he wants to say to her. Iron gently advises the prince that a letter to someone he genuinely likes should actually show some real sincerity and deep feelings. But Enosh avoids his gaze, quietly admitting that he just can't do that. He sits back down in the dirt, bitterly muttering that even if he's totally honest, it won't change his doomed fate. Suddenly, Enosh starts violently coughing, blood heavily spilling from his mouth. He gasps for air, completely collapsing as his terminal illness acts up. Iron panics, rushing to the iron bars and screaming into the dark hallway for emergency medical help. He desperately yells that there's a dying patient in the cell, begging for anyone to answer. But the dungeon is dead silent. Iron curses his terrible luck that the prince is crashing at the absolute worst possible moment. Enosh curls into a ball on the cold floor, groaning in sheer agony. Iron watches him suffer, feeling totally helpless. He remembers reading about angels in his picture books, beautiful, mysterious beings who always show up to save the day. He imagines a glorious, glowing savior descending from the heavens. Desperate, Iron wishes an angel would just swoop down right now. And like a literal answer to his prayers, Lucilian gracefully descends from the shadows above. Iron looks up, completely mind-blown by the boy's flawless timing. Meanwhile, on the main floor, the massive underground auction officially kicks off in front of a packed crowd. The masked announcer hypes up the first item, shamelessly joking about the trend of buying people based on looks. But before he can even finish his sleazy pitch, he gets violently yanked by the collar. A terrifying figure stands on the balcony, coldly telling the announcer to get lost. The host absolutely freaks out, screaming for security to drag the crazy intruder away. But as the guards rush in, the terrifying man fully steps into the light, radiating pure murderous intent. The announcer absolutely soils himself, recognizing the iconic dragon mask as the symbol of the monstrous Edem clan. Erno is here. Chaos erupts as guards scramble down the stairs in a total panic. Alvian, hiding behind a black mask, casually intercepts a fleeing guard, asking what the commotion is. The terrified guard lies, claiming he just tripped, and Alvian smoothly helps him up, completely blending into the chaos. Back in the dungeon, as Enosh fades in and out of consciousness, a tragic flashback reveals why he wrote such a terrible letter to Lady Lillian. The Emperor had arranged their political marriage, pairing the dying prince with the brilliant, highly gifted young noble. The grand exchange ceremony was held at the Imperial Palace. Lillian looked stunning in her white dress, standing beside the doomed second prince. But Enosh's face was completely shadowed with guilt. As they prepared to sign the official oath of engagement, Enosh stared at the wedding ring, agonizing over the fact that he was destined to die before ever growing up. Knowing his death would leave her completely trapped and alone, he realized he couldn't go through with it. The priest prompted him to place the ring on his bride's finger. But Enosh hesitated, trembling as the weight of his terminal illness crushed him. Refusing to drag a beautiful, innocent girl down with him, the prince made a heartbreaking choice. He decided to purposely act like absolute garbage so she would hate him forever. Snapping back to the present, Lucilian hands Iron a disguise, laying out a quick escape route through the backstage. Iron sighs in relief, helping the semi-conscious Enosh up and telling him to fix his coat for the run. Supporting the sick prince between them, Iron and Lucilian slowly creep toward the exit. Suddenly, Enosh snaps awake, aggressively complaining about commoners touching his precious royal body. Iron quickly slaps a hand over the brat's mouth, fiercely whispering that Lucilian just gave him first aid and is literally saving their lives. Lucilian looks at the spoiled prince, calmly telling him to just have faith in them for once. As the booming voice of the auctioneer echoes through the halls, announcing a massive winning bid. Iron knows their window is rapidly closing, and the trio makes a desperate, stealthy sprint for freedom. Iron, Lucilian, and the prince finally bust through the dungeon doors as the auctioneer's voice echoes from the main stage. The host hypes up the next premium item. He guarantees the roaring crowd is going to absolutely lose their minds over this one. The prince violently cringes at being called an item, swearing he'll punish them all when he gets out. But Iron's blood runs cold when the auctioneer announces the next item is a rare pink mutant lizard. Peeking through the curtains, Iron realizes they are talking about him. Suddenly, Erno Etam steps down the stairs in his dragon mask, looking ready to completely vaporize the entire room. Realizing his overpowered dad wasn't even supposed to be here in the original plot, Iron and the boys make a mad dash for the exit. Erno smirks like a supervillain as his lackey reports in, completely unaware his son is slipping right out the back. Iron guides the group outside, sticking to the shadows to avoid the roaming guards. He keeps his eyes peeled, focused entirely on survival. Finally reaching the woods, the exhausted prince collapses onto the grass like a sack of bricks. Iron tells them it's safe to rest under the massive tree while they catch their breath. Lucilian apologizes for taking so long, but Iron is just glad his loyal sidekick showed up at all. Catching his breath, the prince angrily snaps at Lucilian, demanding to know who this random kid is. Flashing a bright smile, the white-haired boy introduces himself. When the prince asks if he's a guard, Lucilian casually explains he just heard his master's thoughts and literally dropped in from the sky. The prince looks at him like he belongs in a psych ward, but Iron ignores the royal brat and asks Lucilian for a massive favor. He asks the boy if he can sneak back into the heavily guarded auction house. Iron hands over the two crucial letters, explaining they urgently need to go to the guys in the red dragon and gray wolf masks. Lucilian instantly agrees but asks for a quick hug to recharge his energy. He smiles warmly, totally unfazed by the chaos around them. But out of nowhere, Iron's massive pink lizard tail completely bursts out from under his cloak. Iron is caught totally off guard by his sudden magical growth spurt. Acting fast, Lucilian throws up a massive protective barrier to cloak them. He warns Iron and the prince not to move or make a single sound. Flashing one last smile, Lucilian promises to be right back and darts off into the night. Left alone in the glowing dome, the prince stares blankly at Iron's giant, exposed tail. Just seconds later, a horde of furious guards swarm the woods with torches, hunting for the escaped merchandise. Iron holds his breath, praying the magic dome holds up. Luckily, the guards run right past them. Iron breathes a sigh of relief and checks on his royal cellmate. But the prince just glares at him in silence. Iron casually calls him Doe, which immediately sets the kid off on a violent coughing fit. The spoiled royal demands to know why a commoner is speaking to him so informally, preaching about their massive status difference. Iron just sighs, but then the prince suddenly grabs Iron's letter. Before Iron can even react, the brat completely shreds the paper to pieces. Iron loses his mind, screaming at him. The prince casually deflects, claiming Iron said the letter literally smelled bad. The torn pieces flutter to the ground, taking the secret plague cure with them. The boy shrugs, saying it's easier to just disappear without sending his fiancée a clumsy goodbye note. Iron stares at him, realizing the kid is purposely acting like a jerk to push away the girl he actually cares about. The prince admits a letter won't truly convey his feelings anyway. He solemnly confesses that he's going to die before the winter is over. Staring out into the night, he reveals he's always been hanging on by a thread, kept alive only by the emperor's rare medicinal herbs. But he knows he's finally reached his limit and refuses to hand his fiancée a withering flower. He flashes a tragic, heartbreaking smile. But Iron isn't about to let the plot hit a bad ending today. Dropping the nicknames, he looks the prince dead in the eye and tells him to listen closely. Grabbing the kid by the shoulders, Iron orders him to seek out Callan Etam the second he gets back to the palace. He specifically tells the shocked prince to ask Callan for insect repellent. Iron promises that this weird modern remedy is the only thing that will absolutely cure his deadly disease, leaving the royal completely dumbfounded. Iron looks the prince dead in the eye, formally introducing himself. He drops the nicknames and firmly tells the boy to call him Iron. But the bratty royal just stares at him, muttering his weird Doe nickname before starting to hack up his lungs. The prince violently coughs, struggling to breathe as his deadly disease flares up. Cursing his frail body, he collapses straight into Iron's arms inside the magical barrier. Outside, the guards instantly snap their heads toward the old tree, hearing the violent coughing. The guards swarm the area, leaving Iron completely panicked inside the dome. He realizes that if they get caught now, they'll be dragged right back to the auction block. A guard holding a torch walks right up to their barrier, thoroughly confused when he sees absolutely nothing but empty space. Suddenly, Lucilian drops back into the dome and literally knocks the prince out cold to shut him up. Gently laying the unconscious royal down, Lucilian smoothly states there's nothing he can do about a congenital disease. He warns Iron that the guards are swarming the forest and they need to bounce immediately. Oh, and he casually adds that he successfully delivered the letters to the red dragon and gray wolf masks. Knowing time is running out, Iron orders Lucilian to leave him behind and take the prince to the gate first. Lucilian is absolutely appalled at the idea of abandoning his master. But Iron grabs his hands, desperately explaining that the prince is in far more danger if he stays here. He gives the white-haired boy a resolute look, begging him to do this one favor. Reluctantly, Lucilian scoops the unconscious prince over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes and promises to return. In a flash of light, he teleports away, leaving Iron completely alone. Sitting in the silent dome, Iron realizes that if he actually just cured the prince, the original novel's plot is completely derailed. Suddenly, a heavy rustling echoes right outside the barrier. Iron instantly curls up into a ball, trying to stay as quiet as a dead mouse. But then a deep, chilling voice calls out for his child. It's Erno Etam. The scene flashes back to the estate, revealing the terrifying adoptive father's current mental state. His chief butler, Kylo, cautiously enters the room. He pours tea and asks Erno if the newly found artifact has helped suppress his tyrannical aura. Erno sits in the dark, looking completely exhausted and admits it hasn't helped at all. Kylo tries to stay positive, noting that Erno's fever has finally broken. But Erno rubs his temples, confessing the excruciating headache he got the second Iron disappeared just won't go away. Kylo places Iron's leftover auction ticket on the desk, wishing his master a quick recovery. Staring at the clue, Erno swears he will try absolutely anything to get his son back. But he gives Kylo a dark warning: this is his last attempt. He admits that if he can't find Iron this time, he might finally just give up. Kylo looks at a family portrait, knowing just how deeply painful this loss is for the terrifying Duke. Meanwhile, back in the present, the auction house is still completely unhinged. The host continues hyping up the rare pink-haired lizard to the roaring crowd. Up in the VIP balcony, Headmaster Alvian watches the stage closely in his gray wolf mask. Suddenly, Erno Etem grabs an auctioneer by the collar, dragging him down the hall. Glaring through his red dragon mask with pure murderous intent, he demands to be taken to the kid right now. But when they arrive at the dungeon cell, it's completely empty. Erno goes absolutely ballistic, threatening to obliterate the guards for losing the items. He commands them to bring him the pink and blonde kids immediately if they want to live. A quick flashback reveals how Erno got Iron's message. Lucilian had completely bypassed security, dropping in on the terrifying Duke with a polite greeting. He handed over Iron's letter and vanished into thin air before anyone could even blink. Back at the cell, while Alvian is busy wrecking a guard, Erno finally opens the note. It's addressed to him from Iron, containing the exact modern recipe for the plague cure. Iron also added a frantic PS apologizing and begging Erno to believe he didn't steal the artifact. Crushing the letter, Erno locks onto a faint trail of Iron's leaking pink magic, knowing his boy is nearby. Following the aura straight into the forest, Erno now stands right outside Iron's invisible dome, heartbreakingly asking why he ran away. Erno covers his mouth in absolute panic, convinced Erno is only here to punish him for stealing the artifact. But right as he tries to stay perfectly still, he lets out a tiny sneeze. Iron freezes in terror, realizing he just completely exposed his position. Erno instantly turns toward the invisible dome, calling out his son's name and telling him to look at him. The terrifying Duke softens his voice, asking if he's really that scary or if Iron just didn't want to see him anymore. Erno gently reminds the boy of the warm moments they shared together. He talks about how Iron actively chose to be a part of his family. Kneeling down to Iron's level, Erno asks if the boy really doesn't see him as a father. Extending a gloved hand, he tells Iron to come to him. He promises to stay right by his side until Iron himself tells him to leave. Iron stares at the outstretched hand, completely stunned by the raw emotion. Erno admits he was genuinely shocked when Iron vanished, fearing the boy had chosen to run away from him. He gently urges Iron to share his worries instead of carrying them alone. Iron stays quiet, overwhelmed by the Duke's sincerity. The boy realizes this isn't just a fake survival play to him anymore. He genuinely loves his new family and doesn't want to lose them. But he admits he was terrified of losing this happiness, thinking it would be easier to just cut ties now rather than get hurt later. Erno confesses that his own feelings started out as an act too, but they quickly became incredibly real. He recalls the day his terrifying aura went out of control, causing everyone else to run away in pure fear. But Iron was the only one who stayed, braving the danger to save him. Unable to hold back anymore, Iron blurts out that he's just an ugly, disgusting lizard, reminding Erno that he hates reptiles. But Erno doesn't even blink, smoothly declaring that he actually likes lizards the most. Standing tall, Erno explains he couldn't care less if Iron is a shapeshifter, though a heads up would have been nice. He places the blame entirely on himself, apologizing for not being a reliable enough father for Iron to trust. Iron confesses he can't even transform into a human properly, but Erno instantly promises to hire the best teachers from the South to help him. The Duke admits he has his own dark secrets, but vows to support Iron no matter what. Smiling warmly, Erno asks his son to come back home. Without hesitating, Iron leaps into Erno's arms, feeling completely safe. He finally calls him father, burying his face into Erno's chest. With his son secured, Erno's aura instantly turns ice cold as he orders his shadow assassins to evacuate the captured shapeshifters and destroy the rest of the auction. The assassins acknowledge the brutal order as Erno leaps high into the night sky. Exhausted from the sheer chaos of the night, Iron peacefully falls asleep in his dad's arms. They finally head back to the estate, leaving the doomed auction house behind. Down in the woods, Erno's elite shadow squad prepares to execute the command. They split up to rescue the victims and completely dismantle the criminal guild. But the head assassin, Can, pauses, realizing the massive weight of Erno's order. He reflects on how Erno used to be a ruthless, detached monster who treated his own men like dirt. But after finding Iron, the Duke has completely changed. Kan is absolutely hyped, realizing Erno is finally stepping up to his true potential. Kan commands his squad to follow his lead. He knows the rest of the clan will be thrilled to hear that the Duke is finally accepting his massive inheritance. With a burst of terrifying speed, the assassins dive toward the auction house to lay down some absolute carnage. Meanwhile, Lucilian drops back into the forest, panicking when he finds Iron's barrier completely empty. He frantically calls out for his master. Seeing no signs of a struggle, he curses himself for being too slow and vows to tear the forest apart looking for him. Suddenly, a random guard in a bear mask creeps up behind him, asking what a kid is doing out here. The guard takes one look at Lucilian and gets a very greedy idea. He steps closer, asking if the boy is a lost item. Smirking, the thug figures Lucilian's pretty face will fetch a massive premium on the auction block since he doesn't look like a noble. The guard tells Lucilian to follow him for some food, but the white-haired boy just glares back, his eye glowing with a terrifying, murderous blue light. Lucilian's eye glows a terrifying blue as he commands the guard to kneel down. The bare-masked thug just laughs, thinking this kid is totally bluffing. But in an instant, an overwhelming invisible force drops the massive guard straight to his knees. Lucilian coldly places a hand on the thug's head. With a blinding flash of divine magic, he orders the guard to repent for the rest of his life. The thug's eyes go completely blank, utterly brainwashed by the overwhelming power. He stumbles away into the woods, mindlessly muttering his repentance like a broken NPC. Later that night, Erno Etem's shadow assassins completely swarm the auction house. They show zero mercy, aggressively wrecking any guards that stand in their way. Their orders are absolute: rescue the shapeshifters and leave absolutely nothing else behind. Meanwhile, deep in Iron's subconscious, a vision of his past life plays out. In a modern hospital, doctors look over his original body, baffled by his deep coma. The doctors note there's zero reaction to any stimulus, realizing he's trapped in a completely vegetative state. Outside the room, a frantic relative threatens to sue the hospital if they let him die. The doctor sighs, admitting the patient is just incredibly stubborn. Floating in the darkness, Iron realizes he'd much rather stay asleep in this new dream world than ever wake up in his old one. Suddenly, Iron's eyes snap open in his massive bed at the Edam estate. He groggily looks up at the two boys hovering over him, completely disoriented. His red-haired brother Callan and his black-haired older brother absolutely lose their minds, screaming that he's finally awake. Iron is completely stunned when they tell him he's been out cold for 10 whole days. He bolts upright, sending his brothers into a total panic. Grabbing his brother's shirt, Iron violently demands to know if the insect repellent cured the plague. He aggressively shakes him, demanding updates on the prince, Sharn, Richard, and Lucilian. His older brother gently tells him to calm down, promising to explain everything that happened while he was out. He reveals that their terrifying dad went totally rogue, ready to destroy anyone who breathed near him. He also reassures Iron that the maid who framed him has been permanently taken care of. As for the plague, Callan spent countless sleepless nights locked in his lab synthesizing the cure from Iron's letter. Callan smirks, proudly puffing out his chest. He dramatically brushes it off like it was no big deal, flexing his absolute genius. They explain that the fatal plague had gotten dangerously worse while Iron was kidnapped. But thanks to Iron's exact instructions, they successfully manufactured 200 bottles of the antidote. They distributed the cure across the empire, completely shutting down the outbreak and saving the imperial family. Sitting beside him, Callan holds Iron's hands and genuinely thanks him for saving them all. Iron blinks, completely shocked that his wild meta-knowledge actually worked. The brothers lean in close, their eyes burning with intense curiosity. They demand to know how a little kid figured out such an impossibly complex chemical recipe. They hype him up as an absolute mastermind who just revolutionized the medical world. Both brothers practically beg Iron to teach them his secrets. Iron awkwardly sweats, remembering he literally just Googled bug spray on his tablet in his past life. Seeing him zone out, the black-haired brother gently calls his name. He asks Iron if he's feeling okay. Looking at his caring brothers, Iron smiles and says he's just glad everyone is safe. His brother asks if he's hungry, but Iron just shakes his head. Looking down, Iron admits he just wants to rest a little longer. He quietly apologizes for constantly making his family worry. But his older brother gently reminds Iron that he is their little brother now, and they will always have his back. Iron flashes a soft, genuinely happy smile, finally feeling at home. The older brother grabs Callan by the collar, dragging the whining redhead out of the room so Iron can rest. But before he leaves, he mentions checking Iron's official background. Since Iron isn't legally registered anywhere, he promises to officially adopt him into the Etam family, telling him to pick a favorite date for a massive celebration. Callan cheerfully tells Iron to rest up, excitedly adding that he's always in his room if Iron ever gets bored. After his brothers leave, Iron flops back onto the massive bed, finally letting out a huge sigh of relief. Thinking about the upcoming adoption party, he mutters about receiving a present. A warm flashback plays of Callan and Sharn smiling brightly as they successfully crafted the cure together. But deep down, Iron's imposter syndrome kicks in, feeling like he doesn't actually deserve any of these gifts. Meanwhile, Erno and his two older sons march through the grand halls of the estate. The older brother asks why Erno is personally going to the imperial castle just to register Iron. Erno calmly explains that officially adopting an unrelated child requires direct approval from the imperial family. He completely groans about the annoying law, noting it was only made to stop nobles from trafficking kids for cheap labor or forced marriages. Then Erno casually drops an absolute bombshell, mentioning his plans to step down as head of the family. He looks back at his boys, asking what they think about inheriting the dukedom. Both brothers completely freeze, their jaws hitting the floor in pure shock. Later, Erno arrives at the imperial castle, greeted by a royal attendant holding a glass of wine. Smiling smoothly, the attendant corrects himself, officially addressing Erno as the soon-to-be head of the Edem clan. Erno steps into the throne room, politely greeting the emperor, though he notes the ruler is looking a bit rough these days. He smoothly apologizes for the bluntness, admitting he hasn't exactly been acting like himself lately either. The exhausted emperor sighs, revealing his youngest son caught the sudden plague, which practically shaved years off his life from the stress. He casually mentions the prince is still recovering, but sincerely thanks Erno for the miraculous medicine his family provided. A flashback shows the sick prince resting peacefully in bed after taking Iron's insect repellent. The emperor admits the cure completely wiped out the plague, even if his son's congenital disease remains. He also thanks Erno for doing the empire a massive favor by completely wiping that shady underground auction house off the map. Erno smirks, knowing full well the imperial family is just going to take all the credit for the raid. The emperor chuckles, offering to grant Erno absolutely anything he wants as a reward. Without missing a beat, Erno slams down an official adoption application for Iron. He bluntly tells the emperor that legally adopting the kid is the only payment he wants. The emperor stares at the paper, completely amused, asking if raising lizards is the newest trend. Erno raises an eyebrow, jokingly asking if His Majesty wants to throw hands right now. But the emperor raises a hand to stop him, pointing out a major complication. He reveals that someone else already submitted an official adoption request for the pink lizard shapeshifter. And it was filed 2 days ago by none other than Duke Colin. Meanwhile, over at the Colin estate, a maid nervously knocks on a bedroom door. She calls out to young Master Richard, gently reminding him that it's way past his mealtime. The maid sighs, realizing the depressed kid hasn't stepped out of his room for days since his best friend went missing. Suddenly, Duke Michael Colin approaches the door, interrupting the worried maid. But right behind him is Headmaster Alvian, now out of his wolf mask, urgently asking to speak with Richard. The maid flusters a bit over the handsome guest, but explains that the young master is refusing all visitors. Alvian frowns, mentioning it's a huge shame since he specifically came to talk about Iron. The second the maid offers to pass on the message, the bedroom door violently swings open. The scene cuts to a steaming cup of tea as the group finally sits down to talk. Richard looks completely wrecked, having clearly starved himself while mourning his best friend. Duke Colin gently scolds his son, reminding him that Iron would be heartbroken to see him neglecting his health. Staring dead ahead, Richard ignores the lecture and bluntly asks Alvian if he's found Iron yet. Alvian gently admits he's still searching everywhere, promising to report back the second he gets a solid lead. But to cheer the kid up, the headmaster pulls out a little stuffed animal with a bow tie. He slides the plushie across the table, hoping it brings Richard at least a little bit of comfort. Richard hugs the toy tightly to his chest, his eyes welling up with tears as he thinks of Iron. He softly thanks Alvian, while the headmaster confidently assures him that his friend will return safely soon. Taking a sip of his tea, Alvian casually checks if the young noble is feeling any better. But Alvian nearly spits out his drink, doing a massive double take at the kid's obsessive rambling. Completely unfazed, Richard flashes a wildly delusional smile, boldly declaring that the Colin family is officially adopting Iron. Richard holds up the stuffed animal, declaring Iron will live with them as an official member of the Colin family. The scene reveals a fully completed adoption application for Iron under the Colin name. But back at the Imperial Castle, Erno Etem is absolutely furious, burning the document with his blue magic while glaring pure murder. The Emperor nervously tells Erno to calm down and listen as the paper literally turns to ash on his desk. The Emperor explains that Duke Colin just wanted to officially adopt the child who saved his long-lost son, but Erno calls it absolute nonsense. Erno flat out rejects the adoption, fiercely declaring he'll bring Iron into the Edam family instead. The Emperor sighs, begging Erno to be rational and remember he's already a father to 2 kids. He warns the terrifying Duke that he needs to act like a great father first before making wild demands. The Emperor gently reminds him to do it for his children's sake, referencing Iron's peaceful sleeping face. Clearing his throat, the Emperor tries to reason with the overpowered noble. He mentions that Duke Colin's son already completely views Iron as his own brother anyway. Since Duke Colin rarely ever asks for favors, the Emperor admits he approved the adoption just to pay him back. But Erno just glares back with glowing red eyes, radiating pure, terrifying bloodlust. Sweating, the Emperor quickly compromises, saying he'll reissue the approval if Erno can reach an agreement with Duke Colin. Erno instantly drops the scary act, flashing a polite smile and accepting the terms. The Emperor nervously laughs, relieved his good friend understands the political nightmare. The Emperor hints that it would be a massive headache if a duke's position suddenly became vacant. Erno ominously stares at the wall, casually noting that if the petitioner accidentally goes missing or dies, the approval gets cancelled anyway. Meanwhile, back at the Edam estate, Sharn tackles Iron in a massive hug, crying over how worried she was. When Sharn mentions her uncle was super mad, Iron is completely baffled, prompting her to explain that Erno has literally always been like that. She gossips about how strange their cousins are too, with Callan always cooped up in the lab and Cillian acting totally arrogant. Squeezing him tight, Sharn admits having him around makes her feel alive and forbids him from ever leaving again. Iron is shocked to hear her call them gloomy and arrogant, knowing that in the original novel, Sharn was incredibly close to those two. Sharn flashes a bright smile, asking if he wants to go outside and play in the sunlight. Iron politely declines, saying he's busy right now, and Sharn completely understands, assuming he's going to practice purifying his magic. Iron awkwardly agrees, and they promise to meet in the garden after lunch. As Sharn runs off cheering him on, a deep, raspy voice suddenly calls out from behind him. Iron completely freezes, instantly recognizing the terrifying tone. He turns around to see the former head of the Etam clan glaring down at him like a hawk. The old man barks at Iron, furiously demanding to know why he ran away without answering his question. The retired patriarch scolds him for making everyone sick with worry, demanding to know why he was at the underground auction. He strictly forbids Iron from ever stepping foot outside without his permission, his intense aura completely overwhelming the poor kid. Terrified, Iron bursts into tears, frantically apologizing to the scary old man. But the old man instantly panics, whipping out a handkerchief and yelling at him to stop crying, stammering that he just didn't want Iron getting hurt. Chief Butler Kylo steps in, gently wiping Iron's tears and explaining that the old man is just genuinely worried about him. Kylo jokingly adds that the former patriarch is terrible at being honest, so he has to act as his translator, sending the old man into a screaming fit. Kylo smoothly translates the old man's angry yelling as, "You're saying all the embarrassing things I want to say, please stay quiet." The old man furiously denies it, but Kylo just translates his screams as, "I was so worried about my cute little boy that I couldn't sleep." Iron blinks away his tears, completely bewildered as Kylo cheerfully compares him to a cute little baby bird. The old man completely loses it, violently grabbing Kylo by the collar while the butler just laughs it off. Watching the two grown men bicker like children, Iron completely breaks character and bursts out laughing. He giggles adorably, completely melting the tension in the room. The old man and Kylo immediately stop fighting, staring at the precious sight. Flushing bright red from embarrassment, the old man yells at Iron to stop laughing before he tears his lips off. Suddenly, a massive blast of blue magic completely obliterates the room's heavy wooden doors. Erno Edam steps through the smoke, looking like the final boss of the universe. His hand surges with lethal blue flames as he murderously asks his own father what he wanted to do with his son. The old man stammers, completely caught off guard by his overpowered son's dramatic entrance. But then the old man flips the script, angrily pointing his finger and scolding Erno for recklessly blowing up doors and using magic in the house. As the former patriarch yells at his son for never listening, Kylo quietly whisks Iron away to safety while Erno sweetly asks if the explosion startled him. Erno gently pats Iron's head, telling him not to let the grumpy old man bother him. Meanwhile, Kylo calmly informs the Duke that he'll be footing the bill for the completely destroyed wall, which Erno conveniently pretends not to hear. The former patriarch clears his throat, reminding Erno of a certain promise they made. Then, looking incredibly awkward, the old man actually apologizes for scolding Iron earlier. Erno holds Iron close, explaining that they already knew he wasn't an ordinary human. He glares at his father, snapping that interrogating the kid to check if he's a shapeshifter for a second time is way out of line. But Iron completely diffuses the tension, calling the old man grandfather and cheerfully saying he knows the old guy meant no harm. The old man blushes and coughs, admitting it was also wrong of him to hide his true identity from the start. Suddenly, Erno looks down with a serious face, telling Iron he can't forgive him for lying. Iron panics, but Erno quickly clarifies he isn't mad, he's just prepping him for an official paternity test. The grandfather chimes in, explaining that anyone joining the Etam family has to undergo a strict lineage check, no matter what. But the two overpowered men smile warmly, assuring Iron it's just a totally harmless formality and he's permanently stuck with them now. Iron breathes a massive sigh of relief, realizing his new family truly accepts him. He promises to be the most obedient member of the Etam clan, which practically brings the grumpy grandfather to tears of joy. But then the old man drops an absolute bombshell, announcing that Iron is getting a personal tutor. Erno completely agrees, stating that hitting the books is mandatory for a proper Etam noble. Iron internally screams, absolutely dreading the idea of studying after grinding so hard in his past life. He tries to cope, figuring a 5-year-old's curriculum will probably just be coloring books and playtime. But his jaw drops when he walks into his room to find absolute mountains of heavy textbooks on law, kingship, and ancient literature. Erno proudly declares that since Iron is a certified genius, he should blow through the material in just 2 weeks. When Iron questions why he even needs to learn all this, Erno drops a hint about a massive upcoming birthday present. Erno kneels down, locking eyes with his son and asking if he can pull this off. Caught completely off guard by his dad's dazzling final boss level beauty, Iron gets totally mesmerized and automatically agrees. Erno kisses his forehead, telling him he has business to attend to and will see him at dinner. Iron waves goodbye, genuinely thankful for his dad's endless affection. But the second Iron steps into the hallway, he bumps into a maid and completely freezes. Despite forcing a bright smile, he clutches his chest, suddenly overcome by an intense, unexplained urge to absolutely destroy something. Meanwhile, a subordinate tracks Erno down in the Grand Hall with an urgent update. He reports that Sir Khan's elite shadow squad actually launched an attack on Duke Collins' estate, but got completely wrecked and failed the mission. Erno glares in disgust, coldly ordering his men to finish the job in 1 month or he's taking their heads. Walking away, Erno mutters a dark, chilling threat aimed straight at Duke Collin. Cut to the shady back alleys, where a mysterious cloaked figure approaches a closed business, demanding to see the other side of the moon. The eye-patch-wearing receptionist flashes a wicked smirk, recognizing the secret underground password and inviting the stranger inside.